King. Here. William Westad.
Here.
Stephen Mullen.
Present.
Mary Jo Reinhardt. Here. Rita Serene. Here. Christopher Whale.
Present.
New visitor comments? William Ostrowski.
Very good.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for my chance to comment here. The reason that I'm here tonight, I'm a resident of Southern Lehigh School District. I live on Stonegate Drive over in Sunrise Estates. I'm a high school assistant principal at Brandywine Heights High School and their district safety director, so I do have some knowledge about what I'm about to talk about. A couple years ago, you guys had a precedent set of having incoming IEP students having access to full day kindergarten if it was written in their IEP that it would be beneficial for them to do so. My son has a rare genetic epileptic condition. He has SCN8A that we think has caused apraxia, aphasia, one of these speech conditions that have not allowed him to speak. We've got him speech devices. We've got him everything that we possibly can. The one thing that we noticed through going through things here, and your special education department has been wonderful. I've called them, I've talked to them to try to find out if this was something that was still going on in Southern Lehigh, and it is not. COVID got rid of that policy. I don't know if the board members were a part of that or were not. I haven't done my due diligence in trying to figure that out. But I would like to put it to this board's consideration and any future board members that are running to reinstitute that policy of incoming students with IEPs to have a full day kindergarten. Today, I just had my annual IEP meeting with the CLIU, and they told me that out of the 14 districts currently under their purview, Southern Lehigh was the only one that did not have full day kindergarten for any student, let alone students with incoming IEPs. My son will be a kindergarten student in the 24-25 school year. My daughter will be a first grade student in this school district, and we're having another baby at the end of June, which was a nice, wonderful surprise for me. Thank you as well, who also be coming to Southern Lehigh. I am from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. I work hard. I moved down here and researched this district and picked this district to move to because of the educational acumen, the community support, and everything that you all provide here. So I'm asking with the board's consideration to please consider bringing back a full day kindergarten allowance for incoming IEP students, because we are finding through our research, both at St. Luke's, LVHN, and the wonderful people at the CLIU, that it will be academically beneficial for him and may even get him on board with being able to talk. I'm all about inclusion. I want to support the rights of every student possible, especially those that don't have a voice. And my son literally does not have a voice. I have his picture there every day to remind me he doesn't have a voice, so I have to advocate for him. So that is my time here requesting that this board please take that into consideration. I know budget's already done. I know next year's not out of it, but God has me here for a reason to talk to you, because my son will be in kindergarten the year after, and I'm hoping that you will take this into consideration and put that into effect. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nicole Dolan, and I'm speaking tonight because the Liberty Bell roof replacement is not included on the budget draft, as indicated by slide 17 of tonight's budget presentation. I'm here to urge you to either include the Liberty Bell roof replacement in the final budget, or at the very least, explain more about why it will not be included. Dr. Mann has said not now does not mean not ever. I understand and acknowledge that. But not now does mean later, and later can become too late. I'm concerned we have a situation with the Liberty Bell roof where not now is being pushed into too late. As you know, about a year ago, the district had SR Products do a roof study on all of the district buildings. This is the one that used IR imaging, and in some cases, samples were taken from the roofs. On June 14th, 2022, Peter DeBuno of SR Products came to the Facilities Committee meeting to discuss his findings. Mr. Pepe spoke very highly of Mr. DeBuno's expertise on the subject. I wish I could summarize all the details before you discuss the presentation, but there just isn't time. So here are the highlights for now. The problem is that there is a buildup of water between two roofing layers, adding too much weight to the structure, especially in the winter. Mr. DeBuno said each of the following quotes throughout the June meeting, all referring to the Liberty Bell roof. The school that I'm concerned about is Liberty Bell. Whoever designed that really should be shot. That roof has to come off. There's no question in my mind, all that white section. I think that's the highest priority right now. The weight is going to be a problem. You may have a structural problem after a while. That's the other thing you got to worry about. When Dr. Mahan said that the earliest this could be done was the summer of 2024, Mr. Dubuno said, quote, "I would get that before." You already went against Mr. Dubuno's recommendation to replace the Liberty Bell roof in 2023, understandably. By not including it in this budget, it sounds like you are now pushing it 2 years past his recommendation. Before finalizing if it gets into the budget or not, please explain the following to the public. What kind of monitoring is being done? Is it being done by a structural engineer? Will you be doing the same IR imaging to see how much more water the roof has taken on, and if so, at what cost? What are the indicators that would tell you it was time to take action? And what is the timeline at that point? How soon can you even quickly turn around and do something? And how long could you wait to start something? Even if the monitoring catches a roof collapse in time, how long might the building be shut down, and where will classes take place instead? How much more will it cost if it turns into an emergency repair situation? It's one thing to be unaware of an issue that turns into a major problem. But when you are made aware of the issue and are given the data complete with an explanation, and it turns into a major problem, that's called negligence. Thank you.
Mrs. Moyer?
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Reinhardt. An executive session was held on April 18th to discuss a safety and security issue. Another executive session was held tonight before tonight's board meeting to discuss 3 different personnel matters and 3 various issues concerning legal advice and or litigation. Thank you.
Was that exec on the 18th, a full board exec, or was it a committee exec?
It was the Buildings and Grounds
Great,
Committee.
good. I didn't miss, good. I'm not on that. I didn't miss a meeting. Thank you.
I have a motion to approve board minutes from March 27th. Questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, those minutes are approved. Dr. Mann?
Thank you, Mrs. Reinhardt. I have a construction update, which I think we'll just postpone until Mr. Pepe's presentation because we have some action later in the meeting. But I do want to, as far as a broader update, talk about budgeting. Mr. Pepe also will have a presentation on budget, but I wanted to address some issues with respect to staffing, as that kind of falls in between both Mr. Pepe and Dr. Trinkle. So just by way of background, we had some very successful educational, operational, and financial outcomes in the 2021-2022 budget. In this year, in our ongoing 22-23 budget, we are tracking in a very positive way, although it's very early to make any determinations. And as a result of that positive revenue expense outlook as we head into the end of the year, we are accelerating a number of projects and purchases into this year's budget to take pressure off next year's budget, specifically some of Mr. Suma's efforts with respect to internet infrastructure and server virtualization, 2 very necessary, very important, but also very costly initiatives that, again, we hope to be able to pull out of this year's budget in light of our estimate as to where we stand now. And so as we look forward to the 23-24 budget, it is our intention to deliver a budget that empowers us to continue the progress we are making in support of our staff and students, while also holding the line on taxes for the year. So this in spite of the fact that we are facing some headwinds with respect to cost and inflation, and we'll talk a little bit more of that in Mr. Pepe's presentation. But one of the key things that we have to look at each and every year is staffing. It's a very, very critical component to the services we deliver, but also to the costs that we incur with respect to our budget. And so I thought I would take just a few minutes to talk about where we see staffing for next year, some of our plans and recommendations, and obviously it's very important for the board to be able to offer its input into those discussions. So the first aspect or area of staffing that I want to talk about is special education staffing. And right now, we intend to recommend, or we recommend that we add an additional special education teacher. Currently, there are, we have in our two elementary schools, Liberty Bell and Hopewell, some of our higher needs students, or most of our higher needs students, find themselves at Hopewell, even if they live in the area closest to Liberty Bell. And as we look at adding a staff member, what we hope to do is to increase the capacity at Liberty Bell to be able to manage students, not manage students, but provide exceptional service to students, all right, who are higher needs. Now, there may be instances in, for example, an emotional support class where students who would normally go to Liberty Bell simply must be at Hopewell to receive the services. But we think that we can expand significantly our capacity and how we provide services by adding this teacher to our staff at Liberty Bell. And we also recognize that this could be valuable because as we look at early intervention, we see a potential increase in students who would be served, best served by expanding this capacity. And we also think that perhaps over time, as we increase our internal capacity, we may be able to decrease our reliance on the Colonial Intermediate Unit. So we think, after very careful review, that there is ample justification for the addition of a special education teacher. And we look forward to talking about the specifics of this in the near future in a presentation with the board. I just didn't think we could squeeze it in tonight. So our first recommendation will be the addition of a special education teacher. Yes, Dr. Sir.
Sorry, I know you're going to, but before we get off topic, would that allow for something like what you heard with respect to comments? Or is that something that could be looked at before that presentation to the board, perhaps, with respect to IEPs and all-day kindergarten? Just thinking, like you mentioned earlier, intervention, right?
Mhm.
So potentially intervening at an earlier age could have benefits to us too as a district with diminished needs over time of the students span with us. So if we are truly the only ones in the area that are not offering it, I would like to know more about the implications, I guess, financially, especially if we are thinking about adding a staff member.
Of course. And none of the preparation that I did to speak tonight addressed kindergarten. But we certainly need to look at this and come back with a thoughtful response to this very legitimate concern that was put before us tonight. But that is actually independent of what I was prepared to talk about tonight. But nevertheless, a very, very, very important issue for us to consider.
Dr. Main, can you
Yes.
just clarify when you mentioned that it may decrease our reliance on the CLIU?
Yes.
Do we pay the CLIU per pupil, or is it can you mind
Yes.
just
Clarifying
clarifying that for
there
me?
is an administrative budget that we contribute to that the board approves every year
Yep.
for the intermediate unit. So we essentially contribute to the operations of the IU receive
Mhm.
services. However, there are instances where we may have a specific student
Okay.
who we then place in a particular program that is operated by the IU. And in such cases, we pay a substantial fee for the substantial service that we receive from the IU. So
And
that would
that's
be
outside of the normal budget.
that would be
Budgetary.
very much outside the normal
Thank you
budget.
for clarifying.
Yes. And so to the extent, so we will not be able to alter our administrative budget, but to the extent that internal capacity would allow us to service our own students in our own buildings, which ideally is what we would like anyway, that would result in potential savings in costs to the IU.
Thank you.
Could I ask a quick question? I'm glad you mentioned the IU there. When you were talking about that, and not for tonight, but as part of that presentation, is there also going to be a component that I know, for instance, I believe on tonight's agenda, it has the facilities plan for the IU, which typically includes placement of classes throughout the different constituent districts. So the goal of the IU is to pool resources to serve those kids. And we, for instance, have an IU classroom in our middle school that serves the needs of kids, potentially both in our district, but also in who reside in other districts. Is there discussion at this point of perhaps we have such an increased need that we are adding a special education teacher to our staff to meet those needs of those kids? Is there an analysis of whether or not our kids could be served similarly to our middle school classroom cooperative, that is run by the IU? Has there been any discussion of the IU having another classroom in one of our elementary schools that would perhaps serve, the IU would run the class and we would all be constituent members as an IU that could all districts could send kids to those classes? Has there been any, and I don't expect you to answer the question tonight, but as a part of that presentation, could we have an explanation of what that IU classroom embedded in a school means and why that is or isn't appropriate to this situation, and how we could perhaps provide that service to kids in our buildings but not have to pay for it, except and other districts would in a way float the cost by sharing the cost of that classroom?
Yes, that is something that whole discussion is
Right.
something very near and dear to us, because um, not only would we have some interest in saying, could the IU run a class
Right.
with other students? I would have a keen interest in asking if we could run the class and then receive tuition from other school districts to us rather than the IU.
And any of
so
that
we-
cost sharing
we-
is what I was
yeah,
interested in.
We are
But
very
specifically,
interested.
I didn't know we could do that. I
Oh,
hadn't.
yes, we
I had
can.
no idea. So yeah.
And that might be a preview of future discussions
Right.
as the IU retreats to some degree from the services that it is offering to students for good reasons that are theirs. So we very much want to look at the IU. We welcome them, and they provide very valuable services. But for example, to the extent that a class being run by the IU is costing us more in tuition than we could do ourselves, add on to that the prospect of bringing in tuition, we would again say, hey, maybe there's an opportunity here for everyone involved.
Right.
And so that analysis is something that is actually part of why we're a small part, but part of our conversations with this particular teacher as far as increasing capacity. And it very much is something that we will be analyzing and developing recommendations in the future, with the idea that perhaps we can do things as well or better at lower costs, and perhaps even better than lower cost if we're able to serve the needs of other districts.
Right. Anything that can help other districts share and plus it also gets kids closer perhaps to their home district and
Well, that's-
providing a more localized
Yeah.
to both our district and other local
Yeah.
districts. So anything, thanks. So that'll be included in that presentation
Well,
then.
that's going to be include a lot of future conversations.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Yes. All right. So there's special ed. We're at +1 at this point. All right. So the next topic I want to talk about with respect to staffing are technology coaches. We have 2 positions within the district that are entitled technology coaches. Essentially, they're full-time teachers. They serve full-time at the high school, and the second individual splits time between the middle school and the intermediate school. Now, these technology coaches do not provide direct services to students, but rather provide support to our professional staff. They actually provide support to our technology department, and unquestionably, they provide value. They're dedicated individuals who occupy these positions for us and have done very well over time. However, as we look at budgets, and as we look at how do we allocate our staff, all right, I think that reallocating 2 professionals, talented professionals, from positions where they do not provide direct instructional services to students, two positions where they do actually provide direct instructional services, could be a value to the school district. And so our suggestion is that these 2 instructional coaches, those positions change, and or actually be eliminated, those positions be eliminated, and the individuals be reassigned to direct classroom responsibility for students. And they would actually prevent the need to rehire or fill positions of retirees. So they would slide into positions that are currently vacated because of retirements, and therefore we would essentially pick up 2 positions in the budget. All right, and so we go add a special ed position. Looks like we may have openings or 2 vacancies, and then the third issue with respect to staffing I want to discuss is that of elementary class size.
Wait, hang on a second.
Yes.
I had a question about
Yes.
so then who's going to be helping the high school, middle school, and the IS with technology issues?
Well, it would not be, we would look at professional development. So for example, if there were particular areas, it would not be these 2 individuals. So let me begin by saying that. But if there were needs for professional development, we would provide that service and training.
But I
yeah.
guess my
Yeah.
what were these guys doing before that they will no longer be there to do? Like, were they there to help troubleshoot, to help teachers if they were having issues with something in the classroom, or like, is that what they were doing?
Well, no, well, they were doing some of that for sure, but those responsibilities are largely taken care of, and any unmet need that would occur because of this absence of staffing would go to our technology department. We have a process in place called tech tickets, where any teacher who's having trouble with a printer or some form of their technology working would put in a tech ticket. And our technology department has been doing a remarkable job in increasing the efficiency with which we address these tech tickets. And we are at a place now where we have a very constant amount of open tickets, which tells us that as they come in, they're not getting backlogged, they're being processed very efficiently. So to the extent that these individuals were providing technical, computer-related maintenance, I guess, for lack of a better word, would be covered by the tech department. But go ahead.
I work in a high school,
Yeah.
and there's a guy there every day to help with technology issues from like the students and teachers, whoever needs it that day. And his office is like a revolving door of students having problems with their laptops, iPads, whatever.
Yeah.
So are we saying that there won't be somebody at the high school doing that anymore?
No, we're saying we have people at the high school who are doing that. In other words, so the maintenance and technology, like if my printer's not working, I can't connect to the internet, those types of things. My Chromebook is not working. For example, we purchased a whole supply of Chromebooks in reserve that we have ready. And if a student breaks a Chromebook or something happens, we're able to swap in and out, which has not happened in the past. So while they do provide those services, we are very confident that those services can be easily absorbed by our tech department.
So I guess then in that situation, you have an understanding or a calculation of what the volume of those types of requests are that would be replaced, right? Because if you have a constant flow of tech tickets right now with respect to open ones, one would think you would have an increase in them, but you're saying that you could adjust for that increased capacity or need.
Yes.
Based on what you have with
Yes.
respect to numbers.
Yes.
See, my understanding, if I could ask another question, my understanding of a technology coach, at least as was described to me before with those particular positions, is more direct instructional time, in my estimation, and what I understand to be the position, was there because, for example, if a teacher is teaching a class and has a presentation and an electronic group work and partnering system set up to go, and if tech tickets are one thing. Like if a student's computer doesn't work, you're right, they can take it down to the tech ticket office, they can get another computer, swap out, no big deal. If a teacher's computer or the entire system by which they are about to hit go in like 20 minutes, I have a class and I can't get this to operate, and my whole hour and a half class is based on presenting this, my understanding of a technology coach was the ability to immediately step into the classroom and help the teacher troubleshoot that, so that lesson or that project or that helped kids collaborate and learn wasn't derailed in that moment. So that would just be one piece. So I understand what you're saying about a tech ticket. I think the difference between a kid's computer going down and a teacher's computer, not just I can't turn it on, but I have a technological issue that is directly instructionally related to what's going on in the next period of the next class. And then the other side of that, my understanding was also with those technology coaches, is that they would be able to sit down with teachers. You talked about professional development, which is great, but that these, for all of the teachers we have in the district, from a secondary level, for instance, in elementary, you can divide them elementary and secondary levels, above and below sixth grade. Those folks, if a teacher said, you know what, I need to delve deep and I want to get more involved and do a project that's really going to enrich and differentiate for my kids in my classroom, they could sit down with that instructional coach and really lesson plan and plan it out and be walked through the structure of how they could, because a teacher has not, professional development is one thing, but to be able to really successfully execute that kind of a program, you might really need a tech coach. Like, I don't know how to do this, and how is that position? How are our kids going to still get those opportunities, and our teachers still going to be able to give our kids those opportunities if the tech coach doesn't exist? Because I see, and I appreciate the streamlining you're doing, but when you talk about direct instructional services, I see tech coaches as providing direct instructional services in that way, and I don't see how that gap can be bridged by, a robust tech ticket or revolving device kind of. Like, can you help me understand how those things are going to be? Because I don't really see it.
No, very definitely.
Because I just see the kids losing the opportunity, and I don't want that.
So let me address the first part of your question. If we had a circumstance where there was a building problem and teachers couldn't get on to their computers for, on a day where there's testing or something going on, we would send people over to try to address that. All
Right.
So,
if it was just one teacher, though?
Well,
not building wide.
And again, I'm not going to say that, if one teacher is having a problem, we instantly have someone there. And what I would also say is that if that's the level of service we demand, then hire more tech people. All right. So I would also suggest that if that's the level of service that we require, then we should do what I'm suggesting and hire technicians who come in at rates far below what we're paying for a top of the scale teacher. For example, a teacher at the top of the scale makes close to $100,000. That, if we really need to provide the technical assistance that is described in the first part of your question, we should not have these people doing that. All right, because it's inefficient. All right, so that first aspect, if we, for example, find that the level of service falls below where we need to be with respect to technical maintenance of the network and clearing printers and all that kind of stuff, we still shouldn't keep these people in the spot, because we can more efficiently fill roles with different
non-certificated individuals. Okay.
So the maintenance aspect of this, good questions all, but not a concern for me. All right. The concern, you get to the second part of your question, is that these individuals essentially are on call, and that teachers can say, hey, look, I'm working on this project. How can I facilitate this better? And all that kind of stuff related to instruction, right? Where their certificates and their training and their background have more value than, say, their technical expertise at, managing a printer. Okay. And so I would not come here and say that will not be some loss there, that the teachers would not have an opportunity that they would have had in the past to send out an email. When we look at how these individuals have been working, they provide after-school meetings that people attend from time to time. We ask them about the goals they're accomplishing, and they do. But when we look at the totality of the circumstance, right, and the benefit of individuals providing direct instruction to students as opposed to these support positions, we come to a recommendation that we reassign these individuals to fill spots, that we rework our special education department to provide more direct service, and that, and we're getting to the third part, we may need to bring on teachers to keep elementary class sizes low. And so when we look at this in its totality, we say that, as far as allocation of resources, it's a value. And look, it is a value judgment. I'll be the first to say, but I will also tell you that having seen tech coaches, right, very often, well, in two categories. Many times they are kind of residual positions from back when you had to thread the projectors, right, and you really needed people to be in. There are also many are residuals from Classrooms of the Future, which was an initiative that took place some years ago, where like the first one-on-ones came in, and then where there was part of the funding was the tech coaches. My observation is that most districts have moved away from the tech coaches because things have changed, right? And yes, they provide very valuable. These are good people we're talking about who make, good work all the time. But in the context of where we are and where we stand and where we aspire to be, it's hard for me to say add 2 positions and keep these. Now, in contrast, we have an instructional coach at elementary, right? The instructional coach at elementary will be a key person to assist us in implementing our language arts initiatives there and supporting the teachers in that respect. In that area, I have not suggested reassigning or reallocating that position, although it's not direct service to students. It is completely in line with the district objective that we believe will provide enormously positive outcomes. Now, once that objective is met and we have the best ELA program in the Commonwealth, which is where we are heading, then we'll look at it again. All right. But just as we look at this budget today, right now, this is my recommendation with respect to allocation of teaching resources. And again, if I could just segue into the last.
Yeah, thanks for that.
The elementary class size, we can come back to it.
Yeah, what you said about certificated individuals, I just want to thank you for that explanation. What you said about certificated individuals makes a whole lot of sense to me. So thank you for explaining that.
Oh, sure.
It kind of flagged in my mind when you said instruction, but also just, I want to make sure that in this budget, we're also supporting teachers because they're really being taxed. But I appreciate what you said about certificated individuals and finding another way to do that.
Yeah, sure. And the last thing, the last component of our staffing consideration is that of elementary class size. And we've kind of made the commitment and we operate under the idea that if ever an elementary class size hits 26, then we just automatically bring in a new teacher to reduce the section size. Now, that's not to say all of our classes are 26. They're all below that. But if we find that, if a building has 3 or 4 sections of 3rd grade and the students keep coming in and the class size hits a certain 26 number, we bring in a teacher to address it. And again, should it be 26 or 30 or 22? Again, it's a value judgment. I've landed on 26, and that's what we have been doing here. And as we look at the numbers, we are getting close to the need to add an elementary teacher here. Again, we won't know for a while as people come and people go, registration back and forth. So all in, if we look at administration's recommendation, we probably will come in at no net gain of a no net loss of teachers, although there's a chance we could be +1 or there's a chance we could be -1, just depending upon enrollments. Because if we have a surge in enrollment, we may have to hire 2 elementary teachers. If things flatten out and we maybe have some people who transfer, we may have to hire 0 elementary teachers. But our approach is, and I believe the board is supportive, that if we come in and if there's time to reasonably hire a teacher to reduce class size, we will, which usually brings us up to about mid-summer to be able to make those decisions. So that's my pitch on our staffing, and I very much would be interested in further discussion, or we could kind of postpone it and roll it into discussion when Mr. Pepe gives his presentation on the budget.
Mike, can I just ask a quick question?
Yes, of course.
You had mentioned enrollment. Is there any sense to those students who utilized charter schools or cyber charter schools? Is there any sense that there's any change in enrollment from those either we're losing kids to more cyber charter or we're gaining kids back?
Yes, I
It
looked
has
into
a-
that earlier this week, Dr. Wayock, or last week, and we are holding our own, slightly positive.
Slightly positive in that.
Slightly positive
back?
in that,
Okay.
less people in the school, but essentially status quo,
Great.
right? We are gaining a little.
And can you just comment without specifics? Because I didn't bring this up to you
Yeah.
Ahead of time. Are those students our older students? Are they in our high school or their our middle school, or are we looking at
I think it's
elementary?
what's that? I think it's largely evenly
Okay,
distributed.
okay.
Yes.
I mean, more on the high school end.
Okay.
Just sheer size wise, but there is a variety as well.
Gotcha. Thank you.
If it's okay, if I can ask now, because it's related to his comment, his question, because it's later on the agenda. I apologize, but it's the Edmentum portion. So is that staying flat, or are we increasing? Is that based on actual enrolled
Sure.
numbers? Because I'm just wondering
good
if that's
news.
going
It's good
down.
news. It's good
Okay,
news.
because that's the remote learning.
Yes,
just,
we right now I
several-
think we're around 24 enrolled students, and those are also a variety K to 12.
Right.
Some are year long, some are semester, some are course. It just depends on the need.
Okay.
And we significantly reduced that contract from last year to this year. We've maintained the number which is on this agreement for this year, approaching for 23-24, but we have not even fully utilized the current funds in this contract. So there will be a reimbursement, or that will be attributed however we see fit, whether we maintain it for Edmentum or we, however we reallocate that funds. We have not fully expensed that at this time. And I just had a meeting probably a week and a half ago, which was what prompted this contract for tonight, just to kind of take a look at where our enrollment is. There were a few that were unanticipated, which is why having a service like this is more cost effective for us than saying go to a cyber charter outside of us. Based on certain factors, I was not anticipating those 5 enrollments. Nevertheless, we were well positioned to handle it, and we still are. But there is a more revised process and procedure for enrollment with administrative oversight and supervision to make sure that it is the most appropriate academic placement. Because I think there was, coming out of the pandemic and into, back into brick and mortar, there was a reluctance. But I think with our procedure, we've really strategically focused on how to utilize those funds appropriately.
Mrs. Reinhardt, that concludes my report. I thank the board for questions. I look forward to a continued discussion as we hit the Mr. Pepe's presentation. Well, yeah, and now we move to the action items.
I had a question about the
Yeah.
staffing, if I
Yes.
could. Sorry.
Yes.
It just so happens I don't take up for teachers on their having known them, but and I don't know a lot of teachers in the district. I tend to know more of them when they're somebody that my daughter would have had going through, and so my daughter's not in high school, so I don't know anybody in high school too well. But over the years, exceptional teachers kind of show themselves. When you're on the board, you just generally come in, either hear them through constituents, or just we watch the robotics team, and it's pretty obvious that's just an exceptional person. Just as an example, or the debate team and things like that over the years. Lots of good examples, fortunately, in this district to point out. Having said that, I don't know the vast majority of the high school teachers. It just happened to be that a number of years ago, we were doing a video for the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association. I reached out to the district to see if there was someone that would be interested in helping to produce that with us as a project for the school, for both students and us, and ultimately interacted with, I think, the person who is now the technology coach at the high school. And I just confirmed that with Mrs. Trinkle, and he certainly didn't. I have no contact with him. I haven't had contact with him in a number of years. But I was very impressed with him as sort of like a force multiplier type of instructor. And I would suspect he does a very good job in teaching other educators about technology. And I also, though, certainly understand the approach that you have, and the need to continue to look at the budget and find ways to find cost savings. And I completely agree that in a general sense, the place to do that is to look where teaching positions don't have contact with students. I mean, I think that's a generalization, but I would start with the idea that I think that would be an area to look at before you look at people that have direct contact with students. And certainly they have indirect contact, obviously, but the point is taken, and I think that's a good area to look in. One concern, and I think doing it through attrition, which is more or less is what is happening here, like a step away, I guess, so to speak, which is you anticipate retirements, which will so there's not really an overall reduction. There's a movement as opposed to a reduction, which certainly also I think all of us would prefer for our employees. But I do wonder how that exactly works in this case. So do we know what those retirements are? Because if that retirement is a English teacher, and I suspect the person's certified in some kind of high school or broad education, then yes, could they go and teach Moby Dick to somebody? Probably. Would they do it well, having not done it, maybe been out of the classroom for a number of years and not being that area of expertise? Perhaps not. This individual probably would. But my thought is, I guess my question is, do we know that there's an opening in some kind of technology, STEM field or something that we believe that while this person has been out of the classroom for a period of time, that they can come into this position, be excited about it, have the expertise to bring impact? Or do we just think somehow we're going to recycle this person who's doing a very good job with technology, cover an opening that we don't know? Or is there multiple switches that are going to happen? Kind of like double switch or something in baseball. So I guess my concern is, I generally agree with the approach of who to look for first for those types of issues, and I'm okay with attritional savings as well. But the question is, do we have a plan where these two individuals, who I suspect are exceptional in the technology area since they're teaching it to teachers, are they going to end up teaching, having contact with students in that same area, not doing the exact same thing, but a similar thing? Or do we anticipate somehow they are going to end up teaching home economics or something? And I know they don't call that anymore, I suspect. And I have no problem with that. I'm just, and that's the other issue. But I'm just saying, that those two may or may not be alike.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question, Mr. Deming. And what I would say is that before we would make any of, let me just speak broadly, because it's awkward with individuals involved, but anytime we would look to achieve attritional savings through reallocation of staffing, we want to make sure that the individuals would be well suited and appropriately certificated for the assignment that they receive, and receive appropriate time so that they would be able to, appropriately prepare for those assignments. So very definitely that was a critical aspect of our analysis. And we believe that anytime we would reassign someone for such reasons, that our students would be very well served by those individuals in their newly assigned position.
Then, since this is my last budget, I give this a shot. I've long been an advocate for and I don't like to spend money, so this is the only thing I've ever really advocated for in adding a position that I can recall. But I have advocated for it for a period of time, which is our high school library. Which, as I walked down the hall to our executive session today, which is very close to the library, I shudder to walk by there because it's a sad place. And I think anybody sitting here that's been in there, and I don't think I'm knocking anybody, because I'm not sure that there's really anybody in charge of the place anymore.
Perhaps the individual you were talking about.
Well, that's
just
what
a
I had
minute
heard.
ago.
Right. Well, no, that's why I got a plan here.
Yeah. Okay. I'm
And again,
following you, Jeff.
I'm going on the fly.
I'm skipping down the yellow brick
so
road
I
right
haven't-
behind you.
But I at one point, my point is this: I think our library. I recall my library in high school, and many years ago, was a very joyful place. It had a bunch of sunlight in it, which there's not a whole lot of that in this buildings in general. But in Quakertown, we had a lot of sunlight. We had the newspaper on those sticks, and you could read the I could read the baseball. I know you could read the baseball scores in there, when you had a break, and find some other interesting things. It was a fun place to be. People congregated there. It was sort of the main hub of our school. I don't find our library to be that. I do strongly believe that a high school should have a high school librarian. I think it's essential. I think it is a force multiplier. And the reason I bring this up is that, as I recall, and I don't know because I haven't looked into this, and that's the truth, it's just coming to my mind. But at one point, I thought the technology coach, because I interacted with him, at some point got the task of sort of half running the place in there, because I remember his office when I talked to him was right next to it at one point. So it's my last budget, and so I would like to, and I don't know whether that person is certified to do that type of work. Certainly, libraries have become technology hubs in many ways, and that position is not historically what many people might think a librarian, especially at the high school level, once was. But I would advocate one more time before I'm done here to suggest, if not that particular individual, whether in this particular budget, there or part-time or something, to give leadership and a new direction and new life to that area there, the high school, that is the library. I think is a thing that for a school district and a school of our size and stature, that we should have a librarian or someone running the helm there, that is bringing life to that particular part of our high school. And it seems like that might be a possibility here with some of the shifting of potential, and that would be something that has direct impact with students.
I know. I thought he was done.
That's my advocacy.
No,
But-
I agree. I mean, I do think the library is something that could really use some revamping. I do think that students are not able to utilize it to the degree it's supposed to be utilized when you say something's a library. I know that when it comes to checking out books, I know in my experience personally, it's not known that there's a lot of resources there with respect to books. And so we do utilize, which is fine because we do help fund it at this point, right? The Upper Saucon the Southern Lehigh Public Library. So I think it would be great in general to know as we talk more in detail about the budget, even if it's not with personnel, with depending on finances, but at least knowing what kind of resources are allocated directly within the high school budget towards the library. Because I mean, I think it needs to be revamped to what students need it for now, right? I mean, a lot of kids use their computers and they have MacBooks, they use things at home. So I am curious to know where students look up things about scholarships. And, I know there's Canvas and there's applications that they can use, but is there a place where they can go, like a computer lab, for example? Could that be embedded in the library, for example? That's what I remember about, for those that, for example, may not have the resources at home or someone to guide them, even though they may have a laptop. I just putting it out there with respect to college searches, scholarships.
Just
as
I
a-
just had a quick follow up actually. So
Yep.
with regard to the library actually, so I agree. They're very excellent points. I'm actually most concerned that our younger students, specifically fourth, fifth, and sixth, so we have a wonderful library over the intermediate school. It's a beautiful library, has a tremendous amount of resources, wonderful librarian. I am being told that that the amount of books that students are checking out is considerably less this year compared to previous years. And I think, unfortunately, it's a product of COVID and a product of some changes. We don't no longer utilize AR as frequently. I know we had talked about that. While we still have it as a resource, it's not being required. It's not a part of the students' grade, so it's being underutilized. I'm actually I'm actually quite scared for the education of our students for the future, because now we have multiple years now where maybe kids are underutilizing, a wonderful resource, and that's just going to carry, unfortunately, or hopefully we can nip this in the bud, but it's going to carry forward to the middle school and to the high school. We have a wonderful librarian. We have wonderful resources over there. And I'm going to challenge administration, if you could, to look at the curricula or the circulation, if you would, of our libraries and see how it's utilized. I'm under the impression that it is highly underutilized or comparatively to prior years. And that's what makes me most scared is that maybe this is a lost, I hope it's not, but perhaps I hope it does not become a lost resource. But well, and that's a worry. Everything's moving digital. But I think everything you said, Jeff and Dr. Serene, I agree. I think it's a wonderful resource. I think it perhaps is being lost. Yeah.
I think I'd like just to make a quick suggestion with all that is to put together a, sorry, I've been waiting a long time. Been waiting, and I'd like to talk about putting together a strategy for the libraries in general in this school district to figure out where we're headed next. And that may fall within the strategic planning of what Mr. Dimick and Dr. Wayock and the others have done. I think it's time with the changes in technology and, we have 5 libraries here and we need to keep on top of it. I asked the same thing of the Southern Lehigh Public Library, and I would ask the same thing of the school district to put together a strategic plan as to where we're headed next with them. And that will help us in, I think, all these questions.
I agree with Jeff. I think that it would be nice to have somebody in there. The school librarian can serve so many different purposes and values. If I'm not mistaken, our middle school doesn't have a librarian either, does it? Oh, it does. Oh, okay. I was going to say that maybe we could do a little split action there, but I agree. I think that it would be nice to have somebody in there, somebody that can help students, help them research, help them with a multitude of things that maybe their teachers don't have time for.
And kudos to the librarian at the middle school for creating what I hear is a thriving makerspace. And I think that incorporates that whole media center, electronic checking out of resources and making that into a makerspace. So kudos to that programming.
Perhaps we can offer an elective on research and library strategies. Prepare students for what they need to do after they get out of high school. All right, let's move along. Dr. Mann, did you have any comments on the construction update under 4A?
No, other than Mr. Pepe is going to take that up.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Pepe is going to take that up in his report.
All right. So are we moving for a motion?
And so that concludes my report. But we do have 2 action items to address. So we request the board to approve the school board meeting calendar under B, and then consideration of the YMCA agreement under letter C.
It's a
So moved.
memorandum of understanding. It's not an agreement. Okay. All right. Well, let's go with those motions now, since we're there.
So moved.
Second, are you 4B and C is what you're talking
Yeah.
about, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I had a question about one of those items.
Actually, and then we'll work with Karen on the rest of the.
Yeah, I have a question then on that when you're ready for comments.
Okay, let's move. Okay, any comments or questions on those 2 items?
Yeah, I'd just like to ask, maybe Mr. Dimick could answer this, the difference between an agreement and a memorandum of understanding, because in the body of that document, it talks about agreement, and then it's called a memorandum of understanding. So I just wanted to make sure I understood that.
I'm going to give the, I'm going to point to the expert over there. Thank you, Stephen.
Sorry about that, solicitor. I didn't mean to slate you.
So in general, what's the difference between, what is a memorandum of understanding?
A memorandum of understanding is also it's an agreement, but it's another name for an agreement. It essentially has the same terms that you would have under that. Like I said, we weren't asked to review this, so I don't know. I can pull it up and look at it while we're here tonight for you. Okay. essentially it is an agreement at the end of the day. Correct.
I thought it was more informal though more informal than a typical agreement than if we're signing
No.
it. But
No, and it will contain almost identical
Yep,
terms. Like, we
okay.
have the legalese that we have in our agreements. 9 times out of 10, those also carry through to the MOUs.
okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Okay.
I had a question about a separate item, item A with the school board meeting calendar.
Mhm.
I didn't want to take it off of the MOU if anybody had anything else to think about that.
What's your question?
My question is for the school board calendar. I'm reading through it. It looks like we have 4 months in the next academic year where we only have one school board meeting scheduled. I was just wondering if we think that's sufficient and what the reasoning was behind reducing. Like in October, we only have one school board meeting as opposed to November, only one school board meeting as opposed to December is typically one. That I understand. And then I believe in May, there is only one, and that's a workshop scheduled. I was just wondering, I know in other years when I suspect these second and fourth Mondays, wherever they fall, I suspect they're falling on holidays or closed school closure days. But I know in prior years, we just bumped it to, if the school was shut down and we didn't have staff to have it open, we just bumped those meetings to Tuesday as opposed to eliminating the meeting. And I was just wondering what, if we, I'm never really in favor of reducing the number of school board meetings or
Okay, so-
times the community gets to interact. So could I ask us to,
We can do that. We can bump them to Tuesdays, or we could schedule them as needed. Any other thoughts on this,
Yes,
Dr. Wayok?
Yeah.
I would say schedule as needed.
Anybody else?
so I'm only bringing it up. Schedule,
Schedule as needed. Okay.
I'm only
Well-
bringing it up because it reduces the number of times our community gets to hear what's going on and
We
understand and see the sausage being made. And
Well-
I'm generally not in favor of that.
And also the way we have it set up right now is the first meeting is a workshop and the second weekend meeting is a working meeting. And we cover a lot of information, and there's so much information that we can't fit other things that we want to discuss into those meetings. And now we're cutting all of those workshops and everything out. Essentially, you're taking out a lot of discussion and time, and everything will now take longer and will be harder because you're not meeting as often.
Decreased
what, though? I'm not gonna
opportunity
be
for the
here.
public to comment is another reason. It's just, I don't know. It just never seemed to work out well in the past, in my opinion.
And I actually made this schedule and suggested it only because thinking the buildings were closed. Like one is obviously Memorial Day. So the thought was if we had a busy agenda coming, and I'm not disagreeing with any of the suggestions, but if we had a busy agenda coming up or there was an emergent issue, that we could just simply schedule a meeting. But rather than for instance, the day after Memorial Day, or the day after Memorial Day, where maybe people have some things going on, if we could get away with, not bringing people in after the Tuesday after Memorial Day. Again, that was just my approach to it. It's been my approach to things, not to say it's the right approach, but that was the thought. And again, if we have emergent issues or heavy agendas, then we could just schedule a meeting as needed. That was the thought that went behind it when I put the thing together.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, can we vote on those items? All in favor?
Could
Aye.
we separate? Okay. Go ahead.
You want to separate?
Yeah, but I realized we had the motion in a second already. So if we're voting, I will simply vote and state why I'm voting the way I'm voting.
Okay. All
So
in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I realize that my vote will not be recorded this way, but for the record, I am completely in favor of the MOU with the YMCA. Absolutely, positively think it's a great thing, and our kids need a pool and other resources. The school board meeting calendar, because it reduces the number of interactions with our community and because it gives us less time to share and increase understanding and communication. I am a no for the school board calendar simply because it reduces the number of meetings and interactions with the public. I appreciate the reason it was done. I'm just a no.
So noted.
Ditto. I actually very much agree with that. I am a yay for letter C, but a nay for the school board meeting calendar.
Okay.
Could you clarify which items are being voted on? one more time, please?
My understanding was 4B and C, Superintendent's Report, item 4, B, the school board meeting calendar, and the MOU with the YMCA.
Got it. Thank you.
Dr. Trinkle.
Thank you. I have the first item as a brief update regarding the K-3 report card. You have heard a large amount of information from us this school year about curriculum evaluation, review, and implementation. We've also simultaneously dedicated our time to looking at the K-3 report card side by side. We aimed our efforts at this revision to better align with the content and skills that our students are expected to master, and that we're paying close attention to the state standards as well. In each core content area and the curriculum that we're using in our classroom. This fundamentally required us to look at our report cards comprehensively, focusing on the delivery instruction and to redesign how we report progress to you as parents and community members. So I'm going to ask Dr. Solometto to come up and just provide just a brief overview of the process and our outreach. I want to say special thank you to her and the K-3 principals and staff, because this was done in collaboration. This was not done in isolation. So just a very brief update. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm actually going to start by echoing exactly what Dr. Trinkle just said. This was something that really was a collaborative effort, and Dr. Chromiak is here, and she was a big part of that. Mr. Mansfield, teachers at every grade level K-3. So the revisions that we have worked on thus far for the report card really grew from a place of first wanting to develop a little bit more consistency. If you looked at what we had K-3, each report card K-3 looked a little different, and really it shouldn't be that way as much as it was. Certainly the skills could be different that you're reporting on, but there were differences that were really created a sense of inconsistency from K to 1 to 2 to 3. So that's where the need to look at these report cards kind of grew from originally. Then, of course, we have adopted a new core ELA curriculum for next year, and we wanted to make sure that the ELA portion of the report card is reflecting the instruction and the assessment that students are receiving in the classroom. So we looked at that. We looked at the language in the Pennsylvania state standards and made sure that the language on the report card was more reflective of the language in those standards, as well as the curriculum that we know that our students are going to be receiving. While we were at it, we kind of looked at the report card as a whole and said, okay, does this whole entire report card reflect what students in our classrooms are receiving instructionally and in their assessments? And so that was the work that we've done. It's very much still in draft form. We're still working on it. So I would hope that very soon we have a more finalized version that, of course, we will communicate to you and then to the public and to parents so that there's some understanding of the changes that were made. But really, that's where it grew from, and I'm very happy with the results so far. So you'll be hearing more. Yes.
Just a quick comment on that. I'm really happy to hear that. I would give our current report cards a C-. At best. And no, I don't know who, I hope, I don't think anybody's developed that recently, so I certainly don't want to cast aspersions upon anybody, but I think we could do a better job. I know we get an opportunity to meet with teachers, at least at the lower grades, now and again, but, and with different technology, you get feedback through emails and apps and things like that. But when you do think about it, this is your quarterly report on your child's, progress and development. I'll point out like a drop down. I assume some of these are drop down menus because I just see again, I don't know, whatever it is, meets expectations. Yeah, pleasure. Thank you, doctors. Pleasure to have in class. At the same time, I value people's time. I understand that asking them to, but it is nice to think, a teacher put something there that they thought about, that this is, and maybe it is only one thing. I mean, I'd prefer to have one sentence that teacher thought about my child in that class this quarter, as opposed to 4 drop-down menus that they kind of shot out. So I'm really happy to hear that we're looking at that. I think we can do a better job. That would be my suggestion, is to somehow bring a little bit greater personalization so that a parent looks at that, even if it's not lengthy, and kind of thinks, yeah, okay, this is what the feedback is from this teacher on for the quarter. Thank you.
The next item I have is the TransPerfect remote interpreters products and services. We operate that under a consortium with our IU that, if you remember, replaced our language lines agreement. We replaced that with TransPerfect for this year. And with feedback, it's much more operational, much more functional. It's a little bit cheaper. So we're pursuing that again for the next school year. The next item is the Edmentum remote learning agreement, and I did briefly discuss that. Unless there's any more questions, I'll move on. The last item under this section is the Commonwealth University of Pennsylvania and Southern Lehigh School District Memorandum of Understanding. This is an agreement that we did pursue this year. There is a distinct change to this agreement. This year it was free to our students. There is a cost next year. The Commonwealth University does not have subsidy or funding to provide free services or free educational opportunities to those who choose to pursue that enrollment. It is a reduced cost at $115 per credit, yet still a cost. And we are kind of looking internally if there are ways to help support our students and families through grant funding or other opportunities. We will certainly take a look at those. It is a reduced rate. Unfortunately, it is not free, although we will still pursue the MOU for access and opportunity for our high schoolers.
Dr. Trinkle, thank you very much. So regarding that cost, is
Mhm.
there a sense that there are any families where that is cost prohibitive?
I mean, there definitely could be.
Yeah.
And those are the families that, if identified as at risk
Yep.
from that standpoint, we want to help pursue any options available to us, to them, to help reduce that cost even further.
Are we planning on being proactive in that approach? I would
Yes, as long
suggest
as
a
we're made
proactive
aware of
approach.
that
Yeah,
need,
yeah.
absolutely, we
Good.
will turn over any opportunity we can to help those families.
Because I think this is a wonderful opportunity.
Mhm.
I would hate to see
Yes.
that cost be
And we
prohibitive at
hope
all.
to, as entering into this agreement, that we get an adjustment that tells us they found some subsidy, they found some endowments to help them reduce that cost to either zero or even less than $115. We did ask them that specifically before putting that on here, so we were clear.
Thank you.
I'm going to take 5 and 6 together. So if you want to continue commenting on the items under spec ed
Yes.
and student services.
The next item is the Karen Foundation agreement. That is another agreement that we have entered to. It's another contractual agreement to provide those integrated supports, social and emotional supports to our students. This agreement is fully covered for this academic year under PCCD grant funding. There is no cost to the district. It's actually paying for it this year and into next year. And the other item is the 23-24 Special Education Facilities Plan. This is a facilities plan that, as a acting member of the IU, we get to be made aware of and essentially vote on. There are no changes to our classrooms. These are referencing changes to other district IU classrooms that we are acknowledging because we're maintaining our IU support. There are no changes to our IU classrooms here in district. If there would, we would discuss those comprehensively. That's all I have for my items.
CO, IU. Does somebody want to comment on that? The technology pool
Oh.
agreement. I'm sorry, I should have asked.
Do you?
It's on Dr.
That's
May.
number 7.
Oh, the tech
It's
pool
under
agreement.
seven.
I
Yes.
can.
Sorry.
I
The,
can. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
the tech pool agreement is, I think it's maybe $500 or $600. Yeah, $600. And that provides us access to a legal listserv that provides information to us, issues related to student access, compliance with regulations, provides an opportunity to ask some questions. And ultimately, it saves us from having to pick up the phone and ask individual legal questions, which are often covered through this listserv agreement.
Thank you. Okay, can I have a motion for the items contained under 5, 6, and 7?
Second.
Do we have any other comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Okay, those motions are approved. Mr. Pepe.
Thank you, Madam President. First, let me see if I can cast up here. So this should work. I'll just use the microphone so you can hear me a little better. As you can see, we've been following along with this timeline that was divided over board actions and administrative actions. These items have already taken place. So at this point, we're in April and we're looking at the proposed draft budget for approval. And we have already heard from Dr. Mann that there's been a significant amount of reviewing of staffing. And as I say with every year, when it comes to budgets, it's really not a lot of mystery what's in a budget. You know, salary and benefits really move and drive the budget. There was a question about libraries at the high school, for instance. There's still $9,000 budgeted or allocated for supplies in the library, and that's consistent with what it's been in the prior year. So at this point, we're going to be looking ahead to May, and that's when we are going to be looking to get the approval, which will give the regulatory 30 days before the final approval. And that will end up happening in June. And that is the point which we will actually adopt. Okay. So up here, I can show you the Act 1 index that we talk about every year, and I'm just going to help focus in with the lines here. This year, the Act 1 index is as high as it's ever been. It's 4.1%. So that means that the district has the ability to raise the budget up to 4.1% and still be in compliance. However, that's not where we were looking to go. What's driving it is the state average weekly wage, the SAW, and you can see up here it's 5.3. And I talked a little bit about that last year, that was driven by COVID. And if you look around with labor shortage and trying to get more people to work by raising wages. So that's what directly impacts, because you take the state average weekly wage and the employment cost index and you average them together, and that's how they get the Act 1 index at 4.1. So that'll be important later in the presentation. So as we continue, our budget focus has been on three primary areas, and that is getting our expenditures in line with our revenues. And that works both ways. We talked a lot last year about getting the revenue up, and the couple of years prior where there were increases, and that generates more revenue to manage the overall budget. At the same time, looking at cost savings and efficiency, driving efficiencies in areas that do not directly impact what we're here to do, and that's delivery of instruction. Budgeting off actuals versus budget-to-budget comparisons. That's really important, because if I tell you that we reduce something based on what was budgeted last year, there's no value in it. I need to know what we're actually spending year over year to determine a budget moving forward. Is it making sense? And to be able to question, why is something going up? Because some things in the budget do need to go up. Some things are contractual. Some things are beyond our control, like gas and electric, just like at home. And then lastly, zero-based budgeting, justification along with line item analysis. So yes, there's certain salaries that are contractual that will be in the budget year over year. But when we sit down, and especially when I meet with building principals, we ask and we have a lot of dialogue. And I have to say, I'm very impressed with the way they came prepared for the budget this year. And a lot of areas where there was a slight reduction or a bigger reduction, it was at their behest, or we'd have a discussion as to why we really need to be where we are. I just have it by memory. The schools across the board are pretty much where they were. So if they're up or down, it's like within 1%. So there's no major changes, other than high school, I think was down about $5,000. And that speaks to new leadership at the high school and reviewing all those various line items and saying, you know, I really don't need this. This is what I need in order to get through the year. And in certain cases, there were increases. In other cases, there were decreases. But at the end, it netted out to that was about a $5,000 decrease overall. So immediate results. We talked about this when the audit came in, that, you know, the past 6 of 7 years were in deficits. We had 1 year where we had a positive 317,000. And then there you go. The first year we closed the books positive 2.2 million, which is great. But what does it really mean? Because in a vacuum, It looks like a lot of money. When you look at this slide, what it does, it allows us to reestablish a healthier fund balance of 17 million. And what that did is, more importantly, it allowed us to realign our existing reserves to better meet current and future capital construction needs. And that's one of the things that was talked about, which I will address, and that is the roof at Liberty Bell. So when you look at the pie chart, you'll see that the capital reserve is now 7.9 million, which is much more in line with the available needs that we have now and down the road. The unreserved, undesignated fund balance remains at 4.2 million. According to Act 48, we're allowed to have 5.5 million. So we're still a little below, but I think we're running at about 6% off a allowable 8%. So we're in pretty good shape there. So this helps give a little more perspective to what does that $17 million mean. When you look back in time, it means that we've basically helped recover our fund balance to be more in line with where we were in 2016, and that was 17.3 million. So moving towards a more balanced budget, we're now able to forecast more reliability in our revenues. This allows us to project against larger variances against our expenditures. So therefore, we're much closer to where we want it to be. And as you see up here, we have revenue of expenditures of 73.7 against revenue of 73.3. So the projected deficit is much lower than in previous budgets that have been brought forward. And ultimately, it allows us to bring expenditures in line with the available revenues, which is what you're seeing as we're much closer to balanced at this point. The budget breakdown hasn't changed dramatically from prior year. I looked up here, we're still running, salaries and benefits are the lion's share of the expenditures. You can see around the wheel some of the other items, but there really hasn't been a significant change in the breakdown. Local revenue is still, driving the budget mostly. And you see the next one up is state, where we get all our state aid and other factors. As far as positive trends that are continuing to hold is our current tax base. So I blew this up so we could all read it, including me without my glasses. Southern Lehigh, $2,912,992,400. That is the makeup of all the ratables. And that's significant when you look at the prior year. It's up 1.84% from last year, which was $2.8 billion. And more importantly, I highlighted there's an addition of 128 taxable parcels, which means the community is still continuing to grow. And you see that when you're driving anywhere and you see all the new housing that's going on. And the anticipation is that that is going to continue to be a bright outlook over the next couple of years with businesses as well. So how do we stack up among our peers? Because again, just looking at data in a vacuum doesn't tell a lot. Well, I'm happy to tell you in two major categories, which is assessed millage rate and assessed worth, we're 1 and 2. So the first chart I did to help explain that is this one up here, where I'm talking about the change in assessed value over the past 9 years. And you'll see two colors up here. So as you work your way down, we are second from the bottom, and the green means that our assessed value has grown at a better rate than any of our peers outside of, which is on here, Parkland, right. And Parkland has a lot to do with a lot of the warehouses that have gone up, right? So this is over, I captured a 9-year period, and as you can see, that attests to the growth in the ratables. At the same time, the blue demonstrates the increase in millage. So here you want to have a lot of green and you want to have the smallest amount of blue as possible, which we have both. So we're actually number 1 as far as the smallest increase in the millage rate over that same 9-year period,
even with the increases that we did last year and the year before. So to show that a little better, this is strictly the millage rate change. And you can see we are the white bar against all the blue bars. And that just kind of tells it in a visual real quick.
Yeah, yes. Pretty big deal, I think.
Very big deal.
Could I ask a question about your labels, Lou? I'm not asking a question about the budget. I just, if we could just, on your fund balance, the acronyms just for the public, PCERS, and also I forget what it is.
PCERS is the pension.
Yeah.
Our pension obligation.
Yeah, this pension obligation to the state, and OPEB.
Yeah, OPEB. That's other post-employment benefits.
Right.
And we're required to carry a reserve for both. And that's where the auditor will come in and determine whether or not we're adequately funding our potential reserve.
Right. So those are just designated by the state what we must keep
Correct.
in fund balance for the retirement plan and for the other pension benefits.
100%.
Thanks.
Thanks,
And
Emily.
and then the other, just a label question for us in the public, on your pie chart, what is in other ed in that pie chart? What kinds of things are in there?
That's probably more the support programs.
Great. Okay. And then just another labeling question, when we say total revenue for local, state, and federal, specifically, I guess for the federal, we talk about grant funding.
Grants.
Grants are or are not included in those numbers?
They are included.
They are included all across the board? Okay, thank you.
So here, this is I was telling you what happened over the past 9 years because it's an average. So where are we actually currently? So in 2023, you'll see, we're at the 17.25 or whatever our current rate is against all the other districts in the Lehigh Valley. And the point of this is to show that, again, we're still below pretty much everybody except Parkland. Okay. So with that all said, what's the recommendation for this year? And that is no increase in the millage rate. We're going to keep the budget millage rate flat. We're going to hold at 0.17925, and that helps us retain tax levy stability, because that's one of the other things that we're after. It does us no good if we're constantly coming in year after year, either increase, nothing, big increase. We want to try and hold the line as much as possible and still maintain an exceptional district. So here, I told you I'd come back to the Act 1 index. And at the time in which the Act 1 is the highest, we're at one of our lowest points, we're at 0. So I think that's pretty significant to the operation of what we're trying to achieve this year. So then we're here at the slide you see every year, and that's the preliminary draft budget. And in here, I'm just simply focusing on our projected budget. I've already explained where we are as far as the revenue and the expenditure and what that current gap looks like. And again, it's a forecast. As Dr. Mann said, as we're going through, we continue to look at where we are in each year, and hopefully we continue to show up positive. And if so, then our goal there is to make sure that we're properly utilizing any balance that's available to put it back into our capital reserve so that we can address any items that are coming up. So the major headline today is no increase in the millage rate. And that allows us, with a healthier fund balance, to also do that, because at this point, if the budget came out exactly as forecasted, we would simply drop from 17.1 to 16.8, I think is on there. See, 16.6. There you go. However, there are significant budget challenges that remain, and I'm going to detail these real quick. It starts with salary and benefits. And salary and benefits, this year, we're fortunate to offset some of those by reductions in positions. But again, reductions in positions are year over year, but it's that single year in which you reduced the position. You can't cut a position multiple years in a row. So it just readdresses your baseline. And then the other thing is pension obligations were reduced this year. And that's one of the biggest concerns I have as a business numbers guy, And the superintendent and I had talked about past years in which that's happened. And I know from my own experiences in New Jersey, they reduced the pension contributions because they were looking at the funds. And as a result, years later, we started getting major impacts and raises to the pension. So, it seems like a great thing, but I'm concerned with that. The other thing is health benefits. And the biggest concern there is the trend with RX or drugs, which is continuing to go up and up and up. And that is a big driver on, increases. This year, the baseline increase was $781,000 or 11%. Now that was offset in part by a reduction in our census. Again, going back to positions, if we reduce headcount, well, then we're reducing the benefits there too. But again, it's a one-time savings. And negotiated employee contributions, which are continue to be necessary in order to contend with the high cost of healthcare. The next area is energy. And I've talked a lot about gas and electric, and everybody's been paying attention to PPL, for instance. We're trying to mitigate that. We rebid our electric rates in February of 2023 this year. However, as a group, it's still up 25%. And that's also impacted by gas and diesel. And every time it seems like they have a handle on that, you see at the pump, the price is starting to go back up again. So we're not sure where that's at. Transportation costs, they represent $5.1 million of the budget. 3% route increase this year, which is really pretty good when the CPI is running closer to 7. However, the Brandywine midday runs, we had to pick up that according to contract, and that was a $178,000 impact there. Charter school funding, somebody asked about that, how that's going. That continues to be a strain on the overall budget. We're close to 3 mil. It's about 2.858, and that's running at about 3%. So that has not gone down significantly. So now remaining technology and facility needs. And this goes to one of the questions that was brought up in the public, and I appreciate that. And that is, what's not in the budget? Well, some of these items are not necessarily in the operating budget. We would tackle these through our reserves. And that's why it's important to have money in the capital reserve, for instance. Access control and security upgrades, that's one thing that we're looking at. We already have door access, but like everything else, you have to look at, are we continuing to manage the technology, or is it becoming no longer serviceable at a future point? We don't want to get there. So this would be a proactive move. Technology security upgrades, firewall, MFA, these are all items that our technology department's looking at, even like UPS backups, right? So when you tackle each one independently, it doesn't look like a big amount. When you put it all together, it's another $255,000. Copier leases. We currently own our fleet of copiers. Some of those copiers are from 2013. So we're starting to experience more breakdowns and no longer availability of parts and or service. So moving forward, I think it makes much more sense to look at leasing the copiers. So technology, Mr. Suma and I are currently looking at multiple quotes to see where that's shaking out and how we can improve the operation overall. Liberty Bell roof replacement is in here. And again, the key here is items not in the budget, but on our radar. So when you see 1.2 million to 1.7 million, we're aware of it. We continue to monitor it. The one thing that I would say is it's not exhibiting any stress, any signs of stress with the decking. We're not experiencing any leaks. The ceilings are not indicative or not indicating any problem with moisture at this point. What was explained to us is the moisture is trapped in between the barriers. When we go to tackle that particular roof, it'll be a total rip-off. In other words, they're going to take the total top off all the way down to the decking. You'll reassess where the decking's at. They'll, usually pull some core samples. But the other thing too is at the time that was reported, there was a big issue with supply chain also. At this point, supply chains are starting to get better, but this kind of a roof, if it were determined that we needed to move on it, we would simply put this out to bid, and we would be able to do it pretty much, wherever we want. Usually you want to do roofs in summers. That's why we were talking about this summer versus next summer. We continue to update it. One of the things that's really important that we've achieved as a board is getting architectural record in place, because this allows us to pull on EI Associates to come out, and they have engineering in-house, including structural engineers who could come out and do a load study analysis on the roof. They're going to be going through the rest of the schools. They already have the KCBA project or product that was already done. And through the facilities committee, that's one of the things on our radar, to go back to that and see, reprioritize. Now that we have the HVAC underway, now that we have the brick IS underway, now that we have the stadium project underway, what's left, and then start to recode what's green, what's yellow, what's red, prioritization, what needs to move to the top, and putting a plan together. So that's kind of that. Liberty Bell chiller plant replacement, again, that's in order to continue the air conditioning. The chillers are up there. The chillers have reached end of life. Our facilities team does an outstanding job, our HVAC techs who are on site, of getting additional life out of a lot of this equipment. But yet we're aware that there is a price to replace, and we're going to end up getting there. Fleet replacement. The reason I threw this up here is because of the change in pricing. Like a F-250 truck with a plow package is now between $70,000 to $80,000. A couple years back, we would be able to pick that up for $30,000 to $40,000. So that's just, some of the things that are still potentially out there. And that's, what's that?
Budget meetings.
You and Dr. Mann ripping through the field down from the high school to the.
No, actually, they already have one, but again, that's it on its last legs too. But I don't get to ride around in the Gator. I should though. Yeah, I did get one ride down to look at the project, but I wasn't able to drive it. That was our facility director drove. Go ahead.
Just something you had. It was a great presentation. Thank you. It was really helpful. I'm very excited about the lack of projected tax increase. That's awesome. Your slide there with respect to end of life made me think, especially because of my background, I do this a lot. I'm assuming, or I'm hopeful, at least under your leadership, if we don't already, that you're working on some type of master document. So I know there's facilities, right, with respect to when things or repairs will be needed, and you can have like, I'm just picturing a document, which what I'm used to is when the unit was purchased or when the equipment was purchased or initiated, and then you have like a certain number of years in which service contracts are valid, and then there's end of life, right? So I'm assuming based on this that you and Chris, for example, are working on something from a technology perspective. When you mentioned the access and security bit, the copiers, I'm assuming you have something like this for all equipment, I'm hoping, or you're working on that, because then you can
actually, School
project.
Dude, all of the equipment's already cataloged.
Okay.
And everything you're talking about, from the make nomenclature, when it was put into service, what the life expectancy is. The facilities department, they already have that, and that's how they do the preventive maintenance.
But even like the smaller stuff, like I get the bigger bones, but the smaller things like computers, I know we have something in place. I'm just wondering something that puts it all together, right? Like you might have little documents that go with facilities, and just
there's a couple of plans that will work together. For instance, you're talking about technology plan.
Yeah.
The technology plan in that part of the house would be able to catalog that kind of activity. And that's how we're able to tell where we are with the copiers.
Right, like printers, copy. I'm thinking like the small things,
100%.
like just a.
And it's amazing because Chris was able to give us information, and we did walkthroughs where we can tell how many copies they're printing out of which printers, and where like when they were put into service, where they are as far as life. One of the things that we're looking at is redirecting workflow and trying to save through efficiencies, because if I'm printing on a standalone printer, I'm printing at 17, 18 cents a page,
Mhm.
where I could be printing to a multifunctional unit at
Right.
like 0.004 cents a page or 5 cents a page. And hopefully we can get even better pricing.
Right. Okay.
But that's a good point.
I have a question. There's been a lot of focus on our elementary buildings. They got a new, much needed curriculum this year, talking about adding a teacher to lower class sizes, adding a special education teacher. They get to keep a technology person. Each of our buildings has a librarian. And then at the high school, I'm hearing we're absorbing this position. We're going to reallocate for that position. What are we doing for our secondary buildings? And like, what are we doing there? Because I
When
like the
you're talking-
balance seems
if you're talking
skewed.
about, if you're talking about program, then I
Well,
would
programming
defer-
and like I see even like Liberty Bell's roof and chillers and stuff is on this, but I don't see anything allocated for high school or middle school.
Yeah. What we've done is
Oh, all right. So they're
Yeah.
all right. The HVAC.
Yeah, because what I was
All
going
right.
to say to you is we did a facility assessment and we utilized KCBA's assessment because we didn't want to pay another architectural firm to do what's already been done for the district. So that gave us a baseline to start. Then we took that and actually went through when we did a facility walkthrough
I
in
remember.
October, and we looked at every single building. And when it comes to central office, it's like if I ask these principals which building's the best, they better say theirs. When it comes to central office, they're all important to us. And we look holistically at of all of the needs that are present, which one is the highest, whether it's a health and safety need, whether it's a system that's going to fail. Like I talked about the chillers. The chillers at the high school were much higher need than the chillers at Liberty Bell. So that's what made the high school HVAC project a higher priority. And that was also identified in the KCBA analysis. But I take your point, and we definitely go through. But as I said, at this point, we're going to re-examine what's still left and reprioritize what we see should be happening over the next 5 years to get a long-range facility plan.
I mean, along the
Lou.
same lines too. I mean, the teachers. Sorry, I know that in the past, we'd lost a couple of teaching positions, for example, at the high school. So I'm assuming, I know we're looking at elementary class size. I would, continue to ask that we look at the same with secondary, because it does have. In the past, we talked about Penn
No,
State, but
we first of all, the point is we don't play favorites.
Right. I'm not saying
and
you
I know
do.
you're
I
certainly not
just-
saying that. I totally get that for sure. But we also are very cognizant of how we allocate our resources. We have, for example, just a small example, but we're purchasing a mobile lab for the high school for PCs. We're trying to, develop a program that will assist students and ultimately our teachers in doing that. As we looked at our high school schedule this year, candidly, there were some positions that weren't fully full as far as teaching schedules. And we said, look, we need to give this a little time for people to kind of work through and see what we do with numbers. And so, we very much value that question, right? Very, very much. But and yes, our primary focus has been at elementary for our ELA program, and we've been very upfront about that. And we think we'll get the greatest benefit for our community from that effort. But we also have been working very hard on dual enrollment opportunities for our high school students through the great competence of our teachers who are able to deliver that level of instruction. So we are excited about doing great things in all places here, and we have great plans, and we're limited largely by time, but we have great plans that we're going to be doing for all of our buildings. So I thank you for the questions.
I just wanted to say, first of all, so thank you to both Mike, Lou, for addressing the cost side of the equation, right? So I recall sitting at this meeting 2 years ago, and not one time was the cost of our budget discussed. It was all revenue. It was revenue, 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 and the taxes were increased to the Act 1 index. So I want to thank you for addressing the cost side. I know they're challenges, they're difficult decisions, but I want to thank you for addressing the cost side. I also wanted to point out that from a facility standpoint, and thank you for actually putting that up before a community member had asked the question about Liberty Bell, because that's something we had just talked about last Tuesday. We have a lot of costs in this district. I mean, we have a lot of costs with our facilities, which really had been neglected for many years. And so these are all on our radar. It's something that we're thinking about, and thank you for having a plan in place. I think that's something Stephen had really harped on, getting a strategic plan in place for our facilities. And as, hopefully the community can see, there are significant costs, down the line that we have to make sure that we are, managing those costs appropriately. I wanted to ask Lou, and I mean, to have a balanced budget like this is incredible. When you started less than 2 years ago, what was the projected deficit, and how much of the fund balance was being utilized to cover that deficit? Do you recall?
It was projected that we were going to be basically out of money, I think 4 years out.
Yeah, it was incredible. I saw that projection. It was I believe it was $2 million, a $2 million deficit the first year.
Yeah.
3, 4, 5, and as you can imagine, chewing up all that fund balance to cover the cost.
It was actually on
a budget.
average, because I did look at that a couple of weeks ago. It was on average 1.9 million per year.
Yeah.
That was about the
it was
average.
So for you guys to really right this ship very quickly, I think our community owes you a debt of gratitude. No pun intended. Utilizing the term debt to actually kind of right this ship financially. So I want to thank you for that, and I'm very I'm proud to vote for no tax increase this year.
I think it's also safe to say that it was important and crucial that there was the increases in the millage in the prior 2 years that also helped get us to where we are with the revenue.
I also would like to add that it's great that the prior board helped put in this fantastic administrative team, including yourself, Lou. So it was definitely a good choice. I'm really happy that we're moving forward in the positive manner that we are, but I'm going to say it wasn't neglect. I hate that word, especially because it's a negative connotation for the work that was done before you. We sat through multiple meetings, and a lot of these aspects were tied within a larger budgeted project that we couldn't afford. And I think that it's fantastic that the team has taken that, broken it apart, and allowed us to move forward with aspects, including the stadium project. And I do thank the facilities committee for doing that. I think it was key, actually. So thank you.
And if it weren't for the work neglect, I don't like that word either, Dr. Serene. If it weren't for the fact that the prior leadership did not neglect those issues, the stadium project would not be able to be happening right now if the process of permitting and approving and drainage and township approvals and environmental approvals were not put into place 18 months before breaking ground. So I think that we always need to recognize what happened in the past to allow the folks in these seats to move forward as best we can. And we thank the folks who came before for setting us up. And we understand their work was not complete or not finished, but we're going to pick it up and carry it forward. Just like they could not accomplish all the problems. If you left these seats now, there are issues we have yet to resolve. And they are not your fault because they are not resolved. It's just a project for the future. And one person cannot do it all in one sitting. I also, in that line of giving credit to those who were in these seats and in the leadership positions before, I want to give kudos to the staff for Mr. Pepe discussed negotiated employee contributions. That 11% increase in, for instance, benefit healthcare costs. For the first time ever, when I sat on the negotiation team, I could not have been more proud of the collaboration between the staff and the negotiations team, because for the first time, our staff, with their last contract, took on a percentage of cost for their medical benefits. And before that, they paid a flat rate, and they understood that medical benefits were going to increase in cost, and they understood that they were going to take a percentage of that, and therefore, as those costs increase, in effect, their take-home wage would be directly impacted. And I want to thank them for partnering with the school and putting us in the position we are currently in. That took a tremendous amount. I also want to thank them again for, during COVID, putting a pause on their wages and saying, contrary to our contract, we will not accept an increase. I want to thank them for that. And the people who came before put us in the financial position we are in now. I also I had a few questions specifically on the slide. I don't know what number slide it is, but it's the one, the Excel spreadsheet with the yellow highlight on it. I see that next year, am I reading this correctly? 2 items. One, that we are spending down the fund balance each year for the next 5 years, and I see it displayed as a percentage of expenditure, but could you give that to me in millions of dollars perhaps, how much you're spending down the fund balance as it's expressed as a percentage here? And I think in the past we've seen ending fund balance expressed to balance the budget. Is that what I'm seeing above the 1 million, the 399,000, the 100,000? Is that what I'm seeing, but expressed in percentages?
No.
Could you
Actually,
explain that to me?
That's simply a mathematical calculation
Mhm.
projection that I
Right.
inherited. And it just has been in place. I actually took a lot of those numbers out because I don't see the need for us to
Absolutely,
increase
right.
the millage each year. And what happened was, Emily, it was kind of double dipping, so to speak,
Yeah.
because you were showing what the increase in the millage rate was, but then you were showing that you were going to get that every single year. It's already
Yes.
part of your millage now.
Yes, completely
So I took
understand.
them out.
Yes, good.
And
And so that's what we're seeing here because it looks different and it's frankly much more simplified and easier to read than in prior years.
Correct.
But could you explain what we're seeing here in those percentages of ending fund balance going down? Because we're used to seeing dollar amounts. Could you just give us a quick
now the dollar amounts are there too. I don't
up
know if you
above,
missed them.
correct?
No, they're down below. It's just showing you that the fund balance, if that were to continue, would change not as drastically. It'd be going from 16.6 to 16.5 to 15.6 to 14. Whereas in the past,
Right.
it was basically almost gone.
Yeah.
And that's when because I remember my budget presentation last year, I said, if you run out of money, I'm gone.
Oh
I
yes,
said,
yes.
you can't,
Yes, absolutely.
You can't spend more than you're taking in.
The projections were there, but every year the projections were never met. So for instance, they were there and you're right, they were pointless numbers because it was projected that we would be spending down the fund balance much more than we ever did. It was, we always found money at the end of the year, which does not allow you to plan. I prefer this. But yeah, you saw it going to zero and we never had a budget that spent down that much. So I'm asking because that is a great explanation. Thank you, because those numbers were meaningless. They didn't reflect what was that. You're right. You inherited a spreadsheet that every single year was inaccurate because the fund balance rather was not spent down that far. So thanks for making that correction. Am I reading that in the tax increase that you were projecting to be necessary in 2024-25? Is that a 0.4 millage? Am I reading that correctly? In other words, a 2.3% increase anticipated for next year? Could you explain that to me? Because that's what I think I'm seeing.
Yeah, again, that was already in there from previous. I don't necessarily know that we're going to get there, but at this point, I think, it's premature for me to say I'm going to do anything with it. I think in all actuality, our goal is going to be to hold tax levy stability in place.
Sure.
Which, Dr. Mann and myself, both coming from different districts, achieved the same thing
Yeah.
in both of our experiences.
So you inherited that number, but you didn't feel the need to change it?
Not at this point.
So you think that's why I'm asking. Like, you did a really good job of changing this sheet to explain to us really the way we're at and get a good picture. So that's why when I see that 0.4, I'm thinking that's a really good snapshot of where we are.
Yeah, the only thing I can tell you, Emily, is I actually added all those potential increases and we would still be below everybody in the Lehigh
Totally.
area.
Yeah.
As far as our millage.
Which is great.
So I wasn't overly concerned about it.
Okay.
But it's certainly on the radar, but I think every year it's going to be reviewed and adjusted accordingly.
So it's just kind of there to keep us on the radar that we might,
Yeah,
we might need that. And we're still the lowest. Yep. We have the lowest rate in the area, absolutely, but that's still there because we might need to consider going there. I think I had one other. When secondary class size was being discussed, I know it's really hard from a secondary perspective to discuss classes in terms of class size because, I think we've never even seen those numbers because you have individuals, students switching classes all the time. And I know Dr. Mann and I have discussed trying to get a snapshot at an elementary level. It's a realistic number. A secondary level, it's not as realistic. But I just want to caution and see if there's a tool that from a budgeting perspective we could come up with, because that translates into not so much class size, but that translates into kids not being able to take a class. So if the staffing goes down, your class sizes might look great, but kids this year, for example, who wanted to take advanced math courses, you couldn't, there wasn't a teacher, there wasn't a class, they couldn't fit it because we didn't offer it and the class was full. So I would just say, careful when we're looking at class sizes as a function of a budgeting, because if kids aren't able to take those classes, then also if you can't get the class, you also can't get the dual enrollment that you get through those higher advanced level classes. So if we could keep an eye on not just class size, because I know it's not a good measure at the secondary level, but some sort of class availability to those kids who wanted to or
I'd be
could or
confident that
qualified.
they are working on that calculation on a regular basis, Dr. Mann.
Dr. Mann, could you
Yeah.
comment to that? Because I mean, I think that's a bit of a jump.
I would like to make just a couple comments, but my overriding comment is that we are full of great people in this district, sitting at this table, sitting over there, and represented by Mrs. Bauscher in our whole place. And we are on the move together. I promise you that. And we have great aspirations and we are moving, right? So that said, we have limitations with respect to our budget. We live in an environment of scarce resources and we try to allocate them correctly. I'm not sure what numbers are being talked about. The deficits that were run in prior years were actuals. So we did lose money for a time. Who cares? All right. It's done. All right. We're now running surpluses, which we intend to do with no tax increases for a good long time. All right. In this budget, we have a deficit built in. We are going to, now, again, something can happen tomorrow to make a liar out of me. We're not going to come in next year with a deficit. All right. Because state aid will be a little higher and something will happen because we work hard to do this. All right. And we keep a very close eye on schedules. You know, I can't imagine a math class being not run because there were too many. I could imagine it being run because there were 3 kids that signed up and that's not an appropriate allocation of resources. All right. But if there are too many kids in a class, we'll make another section and put a teacher there. Right. Now, if there's a specific instance of where that didn't happen, I would very much like to know. And we could certainly talk about it and see what did happen. But, you know, we do not get it right and will not get it right and often be wrong. But we keep a constant eye on appropriate allocation of resources. And to the extent that we are missing something with a schedule or a teacher or a department, we will adjust quickly. All right. And in the end, we are going to have an outstanding academic and also an outstanding financial future. And I do not anticipate walking to this board anytime and saying we need more money. Right. Unless we want to keep hiring people, in which case we'll say we need more money. And that's good too. Right. But that's just my reaction. I want to conclude by what I started. We have great people here and we're going to be doing great things together.
I'd just like to get back on a question, if you don't mind, or a comment. I am severely concerned about a couple of comments that were brought up in the beginning of this. You touched on it a little bit with respect to Liberty Bell, and I just want to clarify for the public. There were comments made of negligence, roof collapse, structural problems. I want to make this particular reply and to address that, if you wouldn't mind, for Liberty Bell. I think it's important that we clarify that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If we had any statements, from a professional saying that we had a roof that was exhibiting signs of collapse, we would have been right on that. That would have went to the top of the list. If you remember, when we were actually doing the roof analysis and walkthrough, I came back to the particular members of the facility committee with brick from the IS, one of our newest buildings, saying we got a major problem here with bricks falling. And we all dug into that and determined that, you know what, that rises to the level of a health and safety issue. We were even concerned that a shard could fall off the building and potentially hit somebody. So we put signage up and put barriers to keep people away from the building. At this point, we have that well in hand. If the roof at Liberty Bell had presented the issues that were stated in the public meeting, that would have already been on our agenda as something that's happening. I think it's safe to say that whenever we get a report, it's our due diligence and responsibility to look at that and evaluate that and to, continue to observe, and at this point, nothing has changed. We actually ordered the inspection and the test that hadn't been ordered prior. Okay. Having the infrared analysis was a step further than just a visual observation to see what was actually between the layers of the deck and the top. It could be a concrete decking, it could be a tectum decking, it could be a wood deck. There's all different variables there that when you start looking at buildings and structural integrity, if you've got a concrete deck on there, I don't think that's going to be collapsing with some water on it. The bigger concern that we had was we're aware of a problem. It's going to have to be remediated. However, is that the highest priority at this point? Certainly not when we had the IS problem to look at, and certainly not when we had the HVAC situation at the high school. I think we acted swiftly to take advantage of the federal monies available through the ARP ESSER for improved indoor air quality and for upgrading our systems, because that is right in line with the spirit of the grant. And it's an allowable expenditure. So we're able to offset about, I think, about 1.5 million and change of the grant money that otherwise could potentially expire. So we'll continue to go back. And as I also said, I hope that nobody on the board missed this, one of the responsibilities that EI Associates has as our architect of record is to assist us in evaluations of our buildings. And that is certainly one of the things we have for the upcoming month or two, to go back and have evaluation, not by our facilities director or a director of business services, but by a certified engineer. And in this case, we'll probably have a load analysis looked at in conjunction with that as well.
Yeah, for the record, I just want to follow up on that. We spent significant time in the facilities committee to review these things and prioritize and ensure that these claims were not part of it. So I just feel it very important to highlight it based upon all of the other discussions that happen. We don't want people to believe that there are things that are not happening there. Certainly not the case. And as it relates to budget and these other items that were on your slide, again, this is digging out from a planning and execution problem from previous times. So we're moving forward. And, when we talk about these budgets, it wasn't too long ago where there was a $60 million budget that was presented for this district. And it did not include these items that are critical to the infrastructure. So I just want to put that out there because I am part of the facilities committee, and I think it's imperative that we make sure that we're, upfront and outlining what really happened. Thank you.
And most important, the takeaway should be they're on the slide because we put them on the slide. We put them on the slide because that's where our focus is. If our focus wasn't on it, it certainly would not have been one of the items on the slide.
Well, and just to kind of put some closure on this roof issue, I think the opening comment that you made and Mike made at the last facilities meeting after the deluge that came that weekend, and the bucket brigade was not out. Now, I've been on the board for too long at this point, closing out 12 years. And I don't know that I can recall, probably for the last 8 years, that if we'd gotten a rainstorm like that, that there wouldn't have been a leak somewhere in one of the roofs coming into one of the classrooms in one of our buildings. To go through that particular weekend, and actually having been caught in it while on the rail trail, it was astonishing to me that you and Mike shared that there was no leaks. I think that goes to a wonderful facilities department that keeps these buildings very operational, and also the work that you all have done since you've been here in the district to assess the issues, make small corrections, and have a long-term plan in place. And it's a great reassurance to me as I leave here in November that there's an administration here who gets it and is delivering for the taxpayers. And I really thank you for that.
Okay, Madam President, if there's no other questions on the budget presentation, I might as well, since I'm up here, I'll cover the items under business and finance.
Thank you.
Okay, so bills list is the first item. You'll see from the summary, the general fund bills list is at $2 million. I think that's comprised mostly of transportation in the area of Brandywine and Norman Bus at 289 and 153. So together they make up 441,000 of the 2 million. In the area of special ed, we had a discussion earlier, and I was kind of chuckling because it was on my radar too. The IU, for instance, special education, $566,000. And that's based or predicated on the actual needs of the students we have in programs over there. And that's above and beyond the operational piece that we get charged. Great Minds Educational or elementary schools, I think $300,000. Your department's done a great job with ensuring that that's being put through. And again, that's funded by grants. That's a lot of the ESSER money, I believe, covered all of that. LCTI, again, standard billing, $145,000. So those are really the big ones. Everything else is kind of small, but adds up. You'll also notice we have a pretty healthy construction fund bill this month, and that's $536,000. The majority of that is going to Athletic Fields of America for all the work that you see happening down there with the drainage, and they've done a bang-up job. We're very, very pleased with where they are, both with schedule, but most important, the level of professionalism and care. And the oversight does not just stop with the facility director or myself. It also extends to the board through the construction committee. And we just had the gentleman from AFOA come into the meeting, Zoom in to give an update. And Dr. Mann and I were very impressed with how he has the whole project right here, every step of what's happening, as if he's down there digging the ditches. So they're very squared away. Dewey is helping us with our IS brick replacement project we talked about. EI Associates, 5,700, part of the architect of record, and that was helping to get our contracts in place for Athletic Fields of America. So that's pretty much it on the bills list. Unless anybody has a specific question, I'm going to move to the next topic. Okay, so the next topic is the treasurer's report. Treasurer's report continues to be a really good indicator of how we're doing very well in the current year, capturing all of the potential higher interest rates that are available. I just moved $10 million back today from the PSLAF, which is the Pennsylvania State Liquid Asset Fund. We had put that money out. We put that money out at 4% basically at a time when the banks were paying less than 2%. Now we are bringing it back, and it's coming back into our account at 4.6%, which we need now to finish paying out the rest of the bills and also payrolls for the year. So any questions about that? Okay. Property tax refunds, they're pretty standard on here. You'll see a couple that are a little larger, and they all have to do with one particular address. And that's from the Common Pleas Court decision. And in total, I think that makes up about 30,000, close to, of what you see on there. And that's been, something that the board with the previous attorney has gone through, and now it's all come to fruition. And I think that's really, on the last piece is simply getting me on the signature cards for one of the loans that's already out there. And that's with TD Bank. And that's so that I can have access to amortization schedules and other things that are associated with making the payments, because I have to make the payments.
I don't know, Lou. Do you really want your name attached to something called the sinking fund?
Yeah, they're all called the sinking.
I know.
Funds. Yeah. And it's funny, but it's, principal and interest.
Yeah.
And whenever we open it up,
Yeah.
it's called the sinking.
Oh, yeah, I get it.
Okay, Madam President, I think that's all.
Before we're going to take 8 and 9 together. So if anybody has any questions for Mr. Pepe regarding the HVAC system.
Yeah, actually, I already explained that.
Beyond what we've already discussed.
The carrier proposal?
The unit itself is made by Karen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's, again, another example of how we're trying to take things a step further. Instead of just putting that into the bid and paying a markup from a contractor, we're securing that on our own directly through a national cooperative and probably saving the district, a lot of money. I think we're already 20 to 30,000 ahead of the original quote that we got on that. And that would have been through CoStars. We're doing better going through Sourcewell.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, motion for items contained in municipal finance and support services, 8 and 9. So
Second.
any further questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Those motions are approved. And with that,
HR. Good evening, everyone. So tonight, HR, we have two items to be voted on. One, item A is the first reading of 21 policies in the program section, the 100 section. This is approximately half of this section. We did omit certain policies to be voted on tonight, and we'll have them voted on another night. We're still having the solicitor review those policies and making sure that we have everything in line the way we want them to be before we present them to the board. So again, letter A is the 21 policies of the 100 section on programs. Letter B is the personnel report for the resignations, retirements, and hirings. So I see a question?
Yeah, thanks. I had just a few questions about the policies. I'll try to be brief. Under draft policy 105.1, review of instructional materials by, and I don't have a printout in front of me, I just have a screenshot here I'm working off of. Mr. Dimick, if I could borrow your packet, that'd be swell. But if you can read the rest of it for me, it's 105.1, review of instructional materials by, I don't know, parents, community.
Guardians, and students.
Thank you.
Actually, I have
Okay.
it here because I had the same question.
Okay, good. So for number 6, page 2, it says no more than one request per semester may be made by any parent, guardian, or student for each enrolled child. First of all, per semester. So I'm understanding that one parent per child could make a request to see an instructional material twice a year. That's my understanding of how that reads. And also, it just seems to me from a perspective of allowing parents and community members.
Let's just scratch that.
Yes,
Can we
thank
please
you.
that? I love that. Thank you for interrupting me for that. Let's just scratch that. That twice per year seems ridiculous to me. Parents ought to be able to know what their kids are learning. Great. Thank you. I'll just keep moving on to the next one then. The next one I have just some of these highlighted, some of these bold, and I don't need to extend this tonight, but some of these bold items, like for instance, we were talking about a library media facility and classroom services in draft policy 105 under curriculum. I assume the bold text is what has been changed. If we could just see what was there before, I'm looking at page 1 of 3 on policy 105, item number 2. You had an interest in that one too? I'm glad we're all interested in the same things. That makes our discussion more efficient tonight as board. So if we could see, so the mention of a library media facility and classroom collection, if we could just see what that said before, and also up above the paragraph that says subjects to be taught in the English language, if we just have some clarification, I don't need to go into it tonight, before we're voting on these policies, if we could have some understanding of why English language is specified in that paragraph.
So most of that language is out of our current policy.
Yes, and I was just wondering why that
Rolled it
remained.
over, and then the new information from PSBA is with the bold language.
Okay, great. The bold languages are the changes, though, correct? Yes. Okay, if we could just see what that language was.
They're additions, correct? Correct.
Thank you. That's the difference. Okay, because then that brings me to my next question. So I'm a little confused then, because again on draft policy 105, I as an IU rep, when the IU recently is also 'tis the season to discuss policy. When they were discussing policy, they made a point of like, we as boards in general would really like to get back to the discussion about talking about kids and curriculum and education, and anything we can do to reduce debate and taking focus away from that. So the IU was making a real effort to reduce any confusion or eliminate the use of pronouns. So we never have to have that be a debate here. Could we please look at under delegation of responsibility, when we're talking about the superintendent shall be responsible to the board for the district's curriculum, and then it says he shall establish procedures for curriculum. The IU has taken the initiative, because I was there at their board meeting, to just say things like the superintendent shall be responsible to the board for the district curriculum. The superintendent shall establish procedures for curriculum. It just eliminates, let's just focus on kids and education. Can we please make that to be as neutral as possible and just say the superintendent again? We don't need it. And I think PSBA as well as the IU is moving towards just, instead of saying his, her designee, just the superintendent takes a designee. Could we look to perhaps that? And also, Ms. Reinhardt, you said since everything in bold is an addition and everything that is a change is a strike through, what in the world did we have there before if it wasn't she, he, is my question on that one. Like policy 105, delegation of responsibility, that is in bold. So
It said his, her, and then the last
so okay, that was my confusion, because
the only difference.
okay, good. Okay, because I couldn't understand how that wasn't a strike through and how. Yeah, okay, I get where you're going with that. So some of these bolded things could perhaps be changes, even though I don't see strike through, but it's not really something that's going to have a whole grade, not a substantive change in that effect. Okay. Let me see if there's anything else. I had a question in policy 105.2 about the sorry, I'm trying to find it. It just generally references the teacher shall excuse the teacher or the principal from specific instruction. Oh, that's okay. Yes. 105.2, exemption from instruction. So if for instance, a parent or guardian said, I do not want my child to be participating in that particular instruction or class, this is the procedure that parent goes through by letting the principal know, like, I don't want my, it's against my religious beliefs. I don't want my child participating in that lesson. On draft policy 105.2, it says number 3, it shall not be the responsibility of the district or any of its employees to ensure that the student exercises his or her right to be excused in accordance with parental request. It shall be the responsibility of the student to basically leave class, is what it goes on to say. I won't read the whole thing. I think at an elementary, especially at an elementary level, that is probably an unreasonable responsibility to put on a child. If a parent says, I don't want my child to be a part of this for religious reasons, I don't see how a child could know that particular piece of instruction is coming in time to take responsibility for the child to remove themselves from the room. Could we look at rewording that language? Because there is a level of responsibility once you get to that, high school, 18 years old, 14, 15, age of consent. I know there's some variability there, but just as a blanket statement as district policy, that's not the child, it's the child's responsibility to remove the child from the class if the parent doesn't want, that just seems to be an onerous, unreasonable request. Could we look at rewording that in some way?
We absolutely can, depending on whatever the board wants.
Well, let me just maybe a question to the solicitor. Certainly, our our elementary teachers would try to do the best they can
Right.
in that circumstance. But I just wonder, by changing that language to shift the responsibility to the district, should there be an inadvertent oversight, then would that shift responsibility?
That, yeah, I'd love to hear an explanation on. If you're not prepared tonight, I totally understand. This was out of the blue. I was just trying to.
I can look at it, but I think Dr. Mann is right. You're going to shift the liability, and then you're going to be sued on the policy if we can't 100% ensure that that happens. Sometimes there is human error, but I can look into it. I've been taking notes. I can look into
Thanks.
it in more detail.
Great.
Absolutely.
That's all. I'm looking into it and explaining why it's written that way. I'd appreciate if we can do anything to, if there's any adjustment we can make to not put the school at liability and still ensure the wishes of the parent, assuming human error. Goodness knows in all of this policy, there's going to be human error, and we know teachers and staff will make human error. But if we can do something so that at least the policy isn't written in something. So, and I think, yeah, my only other questions related to some of those, like those bold terms in draft policy 106 guides for planned instruction. There were just a lot of bold sentences, and if those are all additions, great. I just wanted to double check because some of the pronoun switches I saw in here were just bold, and there had to be something there before. So that was just my misunderstanding of trying to figure that out. And retiring from the manual, my last question is under board policy, the paragraph explaining what we are going to retire from board policy. We're going to retire things that relate to the cyber charter students. It's unnecessary to maintain another board policy since we'll be addressing those provisions for students under other draft policies. Are those draft policies things we will be getting to? My fear is that we are retiring a policy and we don't yet have another policy in place simply because they are later in the coded number sequence.
So according to PSBA, that's going to be captured in policy 137.1. So you'll be seeing them real soon.
Okay, but if we're retiring that now, perhaps could we do it on the evening that we vote on policy 130, whatever you just said? Because I hate to retire a policy and then for some reason it's happened before that we have a language kerfuffle and we table it or we decide not to, and then we retired a policy and we didn't approve 130 and we have nothing. Can we adjust the timing of retiring policies that we don't yet have another policy in place for? Does that make sense? What I'm saying, I'm asking, not that you agree, I'm asking what my statement, yes, you're saying yes, you understand what I'm saying. All right, that's all I have.
That's not my decision.
No, not your decision, but that was what I would be proposing to, I guess, the board is, could we please not retire a policy unless it's on the same night where we are retiring, we approve a policy and retire a policy on the same night. No, not a rule, just for this particular policy.
Madam.
I'm in rare agreement with Ms. Gaiman on.
I appreciate that, Jeff.
Sure. 105.2. I understand. I guess there may be some liability issues, but I don't really see the point of it if all the expectation is on the student to excuse themselves from an instruction. That's why I'm surprised by Ms. Gaiman's stance on it. But at least from my perspective, a parent can make the decision on behalf of, in this particular case, potentially their faith as to what they want their child exposed to or not exposed to. And if they tell the school they don't want them to be exposed to something, I don't think it should be the case that, well, if that kid happens to sit through the class and didn't walk himself out, that, we're just going to disregard what the parents had to say, which is the way I read this.
Agree.
And whether that causes liability potentially for us, I think the onus is, it's an important thing. If a parent takes the time to, and we have a number of faiths represented in this district at this point. So for whatever reason, if a parent feels strongly about an area and is able to specify that in writing and justify it and take the time to send it to the school, I don't suspect that happens all that often. Maybe I'm crazy, but I doubt it. Then I think, schools should be able to figure out a way to make sure that's honored. And to say that I certainly agree at the elementary level that some fourth grader is going to walk out, or excuse me, third grader is going to walk out of a class. I just don't see it. And I think it's also potentially likely at the high school level that there would potentially be some embarrassment or anything else. But again, that was a parent's decision. And so I think the school should work with that family to make sure that that's honored. So I don't like this. This looks like a bunch of PSBA nonsense to me, but maybe I'm wrong. But either way, I don't like it.
I just wanted to make a comment about our mission statement, actually. And I wanted to ask, to those who are on the board for a period of time, do you recall when that mission statement, learning, serving, leading, originated? How long that's been in place?
I believe I distinctly remember that conversation and Mr. Dimig making comments about serving he was a fan of that wording. So, Jeff, do you have an idea of when that was? I know we were on the board together, but you love the idea of putting
Yes, that was my
serving,
question. Yes,
serving and
thank-
leading.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Emily.
I
Thank you.
remember him.
Thank you
so
very much.
yeah,
Thank you.
probably then about 7. That's
Great.
what I'm
Thank
recalling.
you very much. It's been
2017. Yeah, that sounds about
so
right.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you.
Thanks, sure, Chris.
So I guess I just wanted to bring to the new board's attention, newer board's attention, and to newer administration, if that's a mission statement that we're going to follow, because I'm very concerned that during 2020, 2021, 2022, we did not follow this mission statement. So learning, serving, leading, one interaction at a time. I think we lost sight of that mission statement very recently, and I don't want us to lose sight of it again. I don't want to just sign over, vote for a policy for something that we're not going to follow. So I want to send a message to the community, and I want to ask our administration, ask everyone here, did we learn from our response during the pandemic? I hope we learned. I hope, something like that will never happen again, or how we responded would never happen again. Serving, did we serve who we are here to serve, the students? I would say we didn't. We served adults. We served the community. We didn't serve the students. The students were not our priority. And did we lead? No, we didn't lead. We followed. We were absolute followers, or that board was followers. We followed Department of Health, local hospitals, doctors who came up, who had really no business talking about teaching students. That's what our job is. Our job is to, as a district, is to teach our students. And unfortunately, we followed and didn't lead. And I would just hope moving forward, and I have faith in our current administration, that we will be leaders moving forward. So I really think that the mission statement, learning, serving, leading, is a positive one. I just hope that we stick to it moving forward.
Chris, I'm tired of this. Chris, no,
Emily,
I
this
know.
is not
Stop.
your meeting,
Hold
Emily.
on.
This is not your meeting.
Nope. I'm going to finish this point. Yes. Well, I started speaking first. Nope. I'm sorry. You interrupted. He attacked and you have interrupted. Nope. It's fine, but you have interrupted me. I am not going to relent on this. You interrupting me meeting after meeting. You interrupted Dr. Serene tonight. He directly looked at me and attacked, and I'm done with this. And what I'm going to say is,
No, I didn't
listen,
attack. What I stated was a
I
fact.
wish
It
we
was a
could conduct
fact, Ms.
these meetings
Gaiman.
with order. What I was going to say is, the point you are missing is it is one interaction at a time. First of all, you are bringing up a topic to attack a prior board and frankly an administrator who is gone and living across the sea, and that does not behoove this community at all. That's not a good use
But
of any
our
of those
job-
administrators'
our
time.
job-
That's not a use of anyone's good.
Our
No,
job-
I will not. If you no,
Our
you
job
nope, you
is
have
for our students and our students.
no. You consistently interrupt me, consistently, meeting after meeting. You did it last meeting. I have had. Well, that is fine. Then if that is the case, you let him talk and you let him attack. And if that is the case, the job of the president is to reduce the temperature in the room. And if you wanted to reduce, then you should have reduced it. So one interaction at a time. I am not. Yeah. No. Sorry. I am going to finish this statement, and you're not going to interrupt me again. Do not. Dr. Wayak, one interaction at a time, what you just did was demonstrate to the community a grudge and looking backwards and making accusatory
No.
statements. And the part of that
It's not a
statement,
grudge.
let
It's
me
not a grudge.
finish. What the
Our
part of that
students-
statement
our students,
is addressing,
unfortunately,
the part of that
their
statement is
learning,
addressing is the integrity
education-
of individual
education was
interactions.
impacted. Oh my
God.
I will
Just
not-
stop.
no, we won't
There
let
is
it go.
no. This
Look,
is not.
their education was
Dr.
impacted.
Serene,
It's our
please
job-
go ahead.
It's our job
Dr. Serene,
to make up for that.
And you know
loss.
what?
Let's
It's your
make up for
job
that
to be an
learning
adult.
loss. And
Now,
I've been an adult this
your
whole
entire
time.
all
this
this.
whole
Stop
time.
living
Thank
in the
you.
past in order to make yourself
No, no,
feel
no.
better.
So
Honestly,
you say that to all the
no,
students
no.
who have been affected by
You-
the decisions that you made.
Okay.
And our job is
Yeah,
to make up for
thanks.
that. And
Hey,
the message
Chris,
I want to send,
what
the
year is
message
it?
that I want to send.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? But do you tell that to students who lost a couple years. Okay.
You know
How
what?
about a simple
You
I'm sorry.
like to take the
A
past
simple
and you
I'm
like to take
sorry.
things that
That's all.
occurred
That's all. You know what?
out
I think that
of
would go a long way
context.
for the community.
No.
For the parents
Stop
who
looking
unfortunately
at the past and pointing fingers and look at the fact that we have
it's just
a
honesty.
great
All this data is coming
team.
out now that we need
Okay,
to take
and
this
you
data.
kept looking at the
and
data,
we
hoping
need
it would
to-
show something different,
No,
but
no, no.
it didn't this time.
It absolutely
when it
has
came
showed
to scores.
something different.
Just
It
stop. It's
absolutely
9 o'clock,
did.
dude. Enough. Just be an adult. No, this is not adult behavior.
Is that it's not enough to write a policy. It's really, really important to train on
You're not
policies.
saying, you're not yelling at him for interrupting you, MJ, right now. This is what I'm talking about.
I am
Okay, he's here for family.
discontinuing this discussion. I would like to get back on to the point of discussing the policies that we are reviewing. And I think it's really important we get back to business. So the business is the policies and some recommendations that were made by Mrs. Gaiman and by Mr. Deming. And my recommendation to the administration is that it's not enough to write a policy and put it in a book, but I would like to a little bit more information about how we're training and instructing the staff, the board around these policies, so that in fact people really understand and embrace the mission and we move forward with that. Or if we make a change that's substantial with regard to parent consent, that folks really understand that that's a policy and that's available to them. So that's my question to administration. And maybe Dr. Mann can answer that and we can move on. And then if anybody else has any more questions about these policies or comments, please direct them to our HR director.
I want to add to
Wait,
that.
could you just let Dr. Mann respond to me first?
Well, let me add something to that particular, because my concern about the district and potential risk, it's not necessarily the regular teacher, but if a substitute comes in and they happen to cover something that that child was supposed to be removed from the classroom from, how are we going to deal with that? So there's a lot of real concerns I have about instituting a policy like that and following through on it consistently that's going to leave a lot of exposure.
Okay, so let me try here. No, because I do have some thoughts. First, let me begin by saying, all right, the policy book is this thick. All right. And that now, because after every time there's an incident somewhere in the Commonwealth, someone says, write a policy, and here you go, right? And I'm the superintendent here for 2 years. I'm not going to pretend to say I've read it front to back, and I'm not going to say that so policies, when something comes down to a policy, you're in trouble. All right. It's like if you have a meeting, people start saying it's Robert's Rules of Order said it's this, that, the other thing, you're off the rails. You failed. Okay. Because the idea is that we don't have to go to the policy when human beings interact appropriately in a way that is cooperative. And we usually go to policy when somebody fumbles, right? So with respect to the issue of religious exemption, right? As a district, we must know how to address a religious objection. And we must be enormously respectful of people who exercise those rights, right? And we must have a process in place, which there is, because as soon as a religious exemption comes in, the principal would forward it over to Dr. Trinkle and likely forward it to me. And we would then open the policy and make sure everything's okay. And then we would work to implement this for the good of the child. And on the day a sub comes in, we might mess it up. And then we would do better the next day. Okay. But if we approach it in the light of we are truly trying, then this policy is fine, right? If we approach it in the light that we really don't agree with this policy and we're going to find a way to work around it so as to get a kid in the class who doesn't want to be there, well, then that's different. All right. So what I can say is that in having done this at a couple times, updating policies is just fraught. All right. And it turns into, can turn into discussions over a period versus a comma. And in a book that's this big, that's just not constructive. Right. And my general thought is that in doing something like this, the perfect cannot be the enemy of the good. Right. Sometimes we have to say good enough when we're talking about not good enough when we're talking about our reading program or our post-secondary opportunities for kids, right? And that's not to get off the hook to say that something like tonight I said, get that out of there. That was ridiculous, that one line there, right? So we have to work on it. So, I will tell you that we could debate policy 100 because it's the first one for 6 months to perfect it in a way that is really good. All right. But then, we would be 100 years away from getting the book done. And so I have not in my career have been as focused on policy as perhaps I should be. And that's not to diminish its importance, but I'm fearful that, we're going to be in trouble getting through this in the how many years are we allotted?
Initially, it was 1.5, but it's now getting pushed about 2.
Right. So we got 2 years of this. So again, maybe I'm going to tell you, if maybe we need a committee. I'm never one for committees either. And Mrs. Reiner said, right? But we can't if we need. But what I'm saying is, if we need to thresh these out to the finest detail, every twice a month, we're going to need a committee. And
2 or 3 salient points.
Absolutely.
And we don't
Yes.
need to beat them. I think those points have been made. They've been heard. I think it's incumbent on administration to come back and make some revisions and recommendations to us. And we can accept that for now. This is why you have a first read, to get those points on the table, to get them out. We don't need to be redundant about it. You know what they are. I don't think it was excessive.
Right. No. And what I would say, like, for example, with respect to the shifting of the liability for who's responsible, I'm disinclined to change that. Because I don't want to, we're going to get sued twice a week for everything, and why make it easier? But in the same breath, I'll say that we have to be respectful of people who seek such an exemption, and we have to go out of our way to make sure that we're
And perhaps we
do it
can
right.
find some language with the help of our solicitor to do that. Okay? PSBA is not the final point of expertise, are they, Mr. Deming? So that's why we have other legal help
And I
here.
think these have been reviewed, right?
They were reviewed a while ago.
Well, one suggestion, if they are reviewed and already reviewed by our solicitor and we have concerns, is that we send our solicitor back to the drawing board and to do some additional research across the country, across the state, to see what other best practices are out there with regard to those policy points. Does that make sense in terms of process? Okay, with that,
I have a question.
go ahead.
It's regarding policy. Let's see. Is that code 111? Is that the policy number? Can you hear me? Okay. Was this always a policy before, and is it just now being enforced? Because I've just heard from someone that now they're saying that this has to occur where they have to provide a lesson plan 3 days in advance. Has this always been, or is this just something new that's coming up?
No, this was always a policy, and that was specifically in that, in our previous policy.
So the teachers all have been providing curriculum.
111?
No,
A
111
written
it's
lesson
actually out of
plan?
order. It's like the third one in row for the new policy. But I'm looking at the old policy right now, and it says the same thing. Lesson plans must be prepared at least 3 days in advance, inspected and conform to the guidelines established by the district and building principal.
Okay, because I had heard that it might be something new that now they're having to do this.
No, this
No.
is
No.
I mean, not, this is the existing policy, but there is legislation out there.
I was going to say, isn't this PDE legislation code?
So there's something different. Okay.
It's required.
by the state.
Any other questions or comments or suggestions on these policies for first reading? Okay, can I have a motion to approve the two motions under Human Resources regarding the personal items presented in the HR report and the first reads?
Could we take those separately, please?
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the first reading of the policies?
Second.
Any other comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Opposed due to the things I outlined. I'm not comfortable approving a policy that, for instance, limits, but before we investigate further, the discussion item of all of the items I brought up, but particularly the one that was about the child removing themselves from the classroom just before we hear more information. That is
Okay,
why I'm voting
so
no.
noted.
But I appreciate
All-
one.
all
I'm
in
sorry.
favor?
We already did that, and everybody said yes except me. But my nay, I would also
Oh, I'm
like
sorry,
to.
you said no. No.
Right,
Okay.
correct. But
Okay,
my,
the
my
motions- the-
clarification is that we did not in the motion designate that we actually struck the line that Dr. Mahan said we should. I'm just clarifying.
Which one was that?
105.1.
So if we're going to take we're going to take a vote and it's going to pass, and obviously it is because I'm the only one voting no, could we please clarify that we at least struck that line by amending the policy? Because I think that's a substantive change that we must make note on before voting.
Okay.
Well, I think you can do a motion to amend the motion, or Mr. Pigeon can strike that and then bring it for the second reading, and you can approve it with the edit at the second reading.
Okay.
Yeah, yes.
We don't need to approve the edit twice?
No.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion is approved.
With my saying nay. Thank you.
Human Resources report, can I have a motion?
Second.
Any comments, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, that HR report is approved. I think we've pretty much covered anything that the facilities has to share, and unless they have anything new or different that hasn't been covered in this meeting thus far. Go ahead.
From the discussion that we had with our Athletic Fields of America last week, one of the burning questions that we have had, I'm sure the community has, is are we still on target for the field to be ready this fall? And they may be wondering, well, why has the field not seen any construction on it substantially yet other than stands coming down? So once these two retention basins are done, the lower one is done, they're working on the upper one now. Once those are done, approved, then they can begin the major field construction. They're not allowed to move earth up at the field until that takes place. We reviewed with them the timing for everything that's to come to hit those milestones and to be ready for when school comes back in session, having an operating field. We are assured right now that we're on target. Pending a monsoon season through summer, we should be able to maintain that. We're being told that the stands, correct me if I'm wrong, Lou, will be coming in June. The footers will, of course, be put in place prior to that. The track surface will be milled up, the old surface, and the construction of the field and getting all of the drainage and everything in place will be done essentially in the June, early July timeframe, with the installation of the field, the carpet itself, going in late July, early August, which means everything goes smoothly. We gain approval, we gain the occupancy permit, also has to take place before we can use the field. But we're looking good right now for a completion on time and everything coming together. So just wanted to give a quick update on that since we didn't speak specifically to it. And Lou, anything to add?
No, just the dates. Substantial completion is August 7th, and that includes fields and grandstand. Final completion, October 10th. So we should have access to the fields by August 7th, and that's what they confirmed they're still on track with. And as you pointed out, unless weather takes a major change that, we don't foresee, they're in good shape.
And just to clarify, that October date, that's more around fulfilling all the punch list items. Much
That is
like moving
correct.
into a home, there's going to be some things, let's take care of that. Let's do this. So it's final completion of everything and it's done.
Yeah, substantial completion is what's important because that's when we have access.
I just want to thank the facilities committee and say a lot of great work has been done to, carry the stadium project as it were into the end zone. And thanks for that, right? Haha, very nice. Yes, I've been asked about that. Yeah, I attended this. The soccer booster was very interested to know if cleats would hit that turf, and I was like, I think it's looking good. I was at that meeting, but so there's a lot of good work being done there. I would suggest that perhaps what we're seeing in people wanting to know more about that project and wanting to know the details of it because it's so long in coming and so important to the community, and also there are so many details and so much potential communication confusion. I think a lot of folks tune in and look at this meeting and replay it if they missed it. I would just offer the possibility of considering also broadcasting and placing on YouTube the facilities committee meetings, because I think a lot of misunderstandings and communication and public interest is focused there. And I think a lot of perhaps what we discussed tonight could have been avoided if that's available to the public. There are positives and negatives to it. I'm just proposing it as a thought.
Okay, thank you. So noted. Do we have any new business or other?
Can I ask
other
a quick
business?
question in our new business? It's really
Sure.
just a quick. The high school robotics team did great and qualified for these finals in Houston. So I'm just wondering how they did. I didn't hear it, see anything. Oh, Tim, great. But I just
Yeah, and they'll be physically here in May. Dr. Serene.
And they'll be here
in May.
They'll be here in May.
They'll be here. I think Mr. Carney will be here tonight, but the team will be here in May.
I was just wondering how they did at the
With the robot?
because they made the finals. And,
Nice.
They were really good.
I have a plug. I have a plug for the IU Special Needs Children's Golf Tournament. Is happening on June 30th. I won't go into the detail about the last IU meeting, but I do want to put a plug in for the charity of if you have a team together and you'd like to help the Special Needs Children's Golf Tournament for the foundation at the IU, contact the IU. It's on their website. It's June 20th. Get your teams together. I just said I'd give that plug. Thanks.
I just a quick follow-up for Mr. Lysette, not that he's the necessary arbiter on it, but my understanding was that is it still the case that when I know that the school district sports athletic teams would have priority, the idea on the turf field is to allow other community athletics to utilize that at some point?
We have not discussed that. I think that's up to the administration, the athletics department, and so on. But
Mr. Dimmick, could you repeat the question?
I would understand that the school district athletic teams would have priority on the turf field once it's completed. But I recall when we discussed it, and also the track, the idea that we would like to have greater community access since it's the entire
definitely.
community's
Like
thing.
we want walkers. We want people out playing bocce ball.
Yep, we do.
All of that.
But also,
yes.
so my point is, I understand that the school would have priority on it, but a turf field like that is something that I suspect will be in demand. And so I was just inquiring because it was my understanding, I thought, that there might be a process for outside of the school district getting priority that potentially other
It would all
athletics
it would all fall under the use of facilities,
Okay.
and
Yeah,
that's
use of
going to
facilities.
come up on the agenda for the facilities committee in the near future. I had a conversation with the athletic director today about that.
Yeah, the line will be happily long, but it will be a
I hope
line.
so.
It
So I
will
hope
be
it gets
a line.
used, right? I mean, I don't know that you can
We,
necessarily.
we want to come back in 7 years and say this turf is out of
Shot.
business, shot.
Yes, I
because
agree
it
on
was
that.
used by so
We
many.
build it, let's use it.
Because so many people use it.
Okay.
paid for it.
Totally agree. I totally agree with that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or new business? Okay, with that, we have visitor comments.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting to speak tonight, so I will be brief. I do want to thank the administration for the consideration of an addition of a special education teacher at the elementary level. Our teachers are working very hard and it is needed. And I am happy to hear also about the possible addition of an additional elementary teacher if class sizes increase. I did want to speak to the board tonight about the reallocation of secondary tech coaches. I'd like to clear up the misconception that they don't work directly with the students to provide instructional services. Their partnership with students and staff is invaluable. I'll share a few examples with you. Please understand this is not an exhaustive list, but one I can tell you off the top of my head and from a personal experience as a classroom teacher. They provide staff with professional development. They assist with tech issues for both staff and students on a daily basis. They update and maintain the school websites. They help teachers develop and integrate creative projects into their classrooms. They develop differentiated instruction opportunities. They co-teach with content teachers in the classrooms. They research new technologies. They assist students with research. Our middle school tech coach runs Studio 22 and What's So Cool About Manufacturing. Our high school tech coach runs the TV studio and manages the library. So I just ask the board that before you make any final decisions about reallocating these positions, speak to the tech coaches to see what they do, speak to the teachers, speak to, most importantly, the students to get the full picture of the critical role that they play. So thank you.
Nicole Dolan.
Mr. Pepe, thank you for clarifying that while the Liberty Bell roof replacement was not in the budget, if it was needed to be done in the next fiscal year, then it would come out of the reserves. That is something that I did not take from that slide. I know you can't reply to me now, but I hope that in future budget discussions, this could be touched on. So does this mean that it is possible, if needed, only if needed, that the Liberty Bell roof replacement could happen in summer of 2024? I'm not expecting a promise or a commitment. I'm just asking if it would be possible, meaning I was incorrect that leaving the Liberty Bell roof replacement out of the budget meant that it was being pushed off to summer 2025. If that's the case, I'm glad to hear it. And I would love to hear it to make sure that I'm getting it now. It would also be great if in the future you could cover the situation where once we see evidence that it is time to do something, here is the timeline of those events. Regarding the three phrases I used in my opening comments, I would like to clarify. I never quoted Mr. DeBuno as saying there is a structural problem. But when he was explaining that the building would continue collecting condensation between those two layers, and when explaining that when you couple that dead load with the live load of something like snow, he did say you may have a structural problem after a while. That is what he said at the meeting. Those were just his words. I never said that Mr. DeBuno said that there would be a roof collapse. I didn't even say that there would be one. What I said was, even if the monitoring catches a roof collapse in time, how long might the building be shut down, and where will the classes take place instead? Meaning I was taking a roof collapse scenario out of the equation. I was asking if there had to be a repair during the school year, how long would Liberty Bell be impacted? And finally, I did not say that there is negligence. What I was saying was that when you know about an issue like this water buildup, and if you choose to put it off longer against expert advice, that would be negligence. If my new understanding is correct that summer 2024 hasn't been removed as a possibility, then it is not the case that it is being pushed off any longer. So I just wanted to clarify all of those things were very conditional statements. And if those conditions aren't met, then the end of the conditional statement is not met either. Thank you.
I wonder if I can give the robotics update separate from my comments, and if not, I understand. I didn't sign up twice, but it's up to you.
How about if we give you 4 minutes to do both?
That would be fine.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you
4
so
minutes
much.
to do both.
All right, I'll do the robotics first. Tim Carney, our robotics team, congratulations. They got back from Houston Sunday. They won 4 matches out of 10. It's not one robot against one robot, it's teams against teams. It is the largest STEM competition in the world. There are about 70 countries there. My daughter got to tour the Space Center, and as a former attendee of Space Camp for Educators, I was very jealous. She got to create a postcard to send to space. She met students from the Philippines, Kazakhstan, United Arabic Emirates, and one who wrote her name in Arabic. Mr. P did say, he's the advisor, asked to tell you that they will be working with high school administration to give a season recap, robot demo, and thanks them for their support. As far as my comments, school safety and school climate. Since our last meeting, there was another school shooting in the news. In schools, the most effective gunfight is the one that never happens. The first line of defense is a healthy school culture where students have adults that they trust and can share concerns with. The Secret Service says as much in their report, shooting analysis. It is critical that schools implement comprehensive programs designed to promote safe and positive school climates. I ask that our school board and community do all they can to promote this safety feature. With that in mind, April is Counseling Awareness Month, and I hope we raise awareness and promote mental health for our students. National Library Week. Thanks to all the librarians. Tomorrow's National Library Workers' Day. Please take time to recognize the hard work, dedication, expertise library support staff and librarians give. Jeff, for report cards, I always wrote positive comments. We had a little comment box where we got to put narrative. If our report cards don't have that, I would highly recommend that feature. Lastly, learning, serving, and leading. My daughter learned during COVID. Maybe not ideal circumstances, but she learned. Our teachers never stopped serving our community. The format changed. We pivoted, but we never stopped teaching. The schools were closed, but students came into our house through Zoom and we came into theirs. My daughter was served by our excellent Southern Lehigh staff. More importantly, I do hope we lead together cooperatively and collaboratively looking forward. Thank you.
And with that, folks, we are adjourned.
I'm eliminating your trip hazard. No, thank you.